Hey guys, how are you all? I hope you all are doing well. Today we are gonna see an amazing what if story, but before we start, it's just a humble request that if you are new here, please subscribe because it actually motivates me a lot to post more. Also, the stories on my channel are fully written by me, so if you have any suggestions for what if stories, please let me know below the comment section. Now without any further delay, let's start. What if Harry Potter was crazy Saiyan? On the night of October 31st, in the small village of Godric's Hollow, something that would have a large effect on the world began. Because of the wards surrounding a certain house, the Muggles, or non-magical people, did not hear the events of what transpired in the house. They did not hear the voice of James Potter yelling to his wife to take their child and run, nor did they hear the cold laughter after the thump of something heavy, the body of James. The begging of Lily Evans Potter was also unheard, and the crumpling sound of her body. But there was something that would have left these simple people scarred and terrified. The screech of horror and rage, like an opening into hell itself, had been breached, from one of the most damned spirits being held under most horrifying torture, came from the unseen house. However, one being witnessed all of this, a green man, young and wearing strange robes, stood with a brown staff held in his hand at the front of the forest near the house. Dend, the guardian of the earth, stood and walked towards the unseen house, and quickly and stealthily moved through the ruined building, until he reached a room. He looked in and paused. In one corner of the room, there sat the robes of one of the darkest lord in the history of the wizarding world. And all that remained of his once physical self, but that did not shock him. What shocked him was the baby boy, Harry. He remembered. He was lying by said robes, playing with a wand that was emitting green, silver and gold sparks, gurgling in amusement, not even bothered about the lightning-shaped cut on his head. Taking a closer look, he spotted the telltale sign of magic surrounding the boy's backside area. As Earth's guardian, Dend could obviously see magic, and knew almost everything about it. And he knew a glamour charm when he saw one. He pointed his street AFF at it and realized a glowing white orb of magic, which cancelled the powerful charm, and couldn't help but gasp in shock. There, what the charm had been hiding, was a tail. My word, this child is a Saiyan, but how can this be? Dend thought. Well, I can't leave him here. If he is not trained right, then there will be very large problems indeed. Single quote. His musings were cut short as his sensitive hearing picked up the sound of an engine approaching. Quickly and gently he lifted the child, and silently teleported back to the entrance of the woods, and watched as a very large man arrived and rushed into the house, only to come back out a few minutes later looking very upset and confused. He got back on the bike and set off again. Dend looked back down at the now sleeping boy. Well, young Ari, he murmured, I believe we should be on our way. We have an old friend of mine to meet. And with that, he faded away. Number 4 Privet Drive. What? An old man demanded angrily. He wherein? There, Professor Dumbledore, sir. I looked round, but there were no sign. Oh, Ari, repeated the very large man. Very well, Hagrid, I shall handle this. You best go join the celebrations, said Dumbledore. With that, Hagrid got back on the bike and took off into the night. What do we do now, Albus? Minerva McGonagall asked her old friend. This is most worrying. I shall send out some of the order to look for the child. He has most likely been taken by a dark wizard, replied Albus. Damn that boy, why couldn't he be a good little brat and be brought here? He must be my golden Gryffindor. My plans are for the good of the light. Dumbledore thought angrily. They both disappeared with a slight pop. Meanwhile, a large green man, looking similar to the one who had been with Harry, was standing on a tree branch with his arms folded, and his eyes narrowed. So the chess master is on the move again. Looks like Kane was right with his suspicions, he growled to himself. With a sharp turn, his white cloak billowed out behind him and he disappeared. Explanation. So Dend, why did you bring us all here again? Asked Gohan, his arm round a very pregnant Vital. They were expecting the baby, a girl, to be born sometime soon. The entire Z team had been called to the lookout by Dend. The guy may be guardian of the earth, but he interrupted aying time. Dad looks like he could cry. Then again, I could really do with that roast we had on. Oh crap. Did I take it off before we left? Dend ignored Gohan for the moment, although he felt confused as Gohan suddenly went a shade paler. He shrugged and stared around at all who had assembled. Friends who had been through thick and thin, and had defended the world for most of their lives. He smiled slightly when he thought of their reactions of the boy's Ciali after he discovered who his real parents were. Dend, please can you just tell us already? You know better than having Vegeta and Goku in the same room for too long, Bulma reminded him. He took a large breath and started his explanation. Well, I was wandering around in Britain, keeping track of a dark wizard who has been causing some nasty problems there. The team never batted an eyelash at the wizard comment. Dend had told them all about the magical society. Now, I watched as he went to a young family's house, the Potters, and murdered them with the killing curse. Being tis guardian I cannot interfere in fate, who knows what the Kais would do to me, but, the most amazing thing happened. The wizard turned his wand to the couple's son, Harry, and cast the same curse. But it rebounded off him and struck Voldemort, destroying his body. Bulma frowned to herself at this. I thought you said that particular curse couldn't be blocked, she asked. Dend nodded. That is indeed true. One of the main reasons I went into the house myself, and I discovered the most amazing thing, he trailed off. Goku looked at Dend and was about to ask why when he felt something nearby, he frowned. The power he could sense was muffled, but definitely there, being the full Saiyan he could easily detect this. He moved towards Vegeta and murmured to the brooding man. Can you sense that? He spoke quickly and slowly, his eyes staring forward. Vegeta scowled, but opened his senses, his eyes widened as he felt the power coming from somewhere close, he didn't know why but it felt somewhat familiar. Kakarot, what is that? It's too strong for someone on this planet to have without us knowing, he whispered harshly. Goku nodded his head, his eyes slightly clouded in thought. Dend, he interrupted slowly. This child doesn't involve what myself and Vegeta are sensing, does it? Everyone turned to look at Goku at this, and then looked back towards the young Namek. Wait, what are ya talking about, Goku? Krillin interrupted. I can't sense anything. As either, spoke Tien and Yamcha. Gohan, Goten and Trunks all frowned. Dad, I am sensing something, but it isn't very clear, it's muffled, spoke a confused Goten. Yay, same, murmured Trunks. I have a theory about that. Dend spoke up. I believe that Goku and Vegeta, as full Saiyans, can sense it, whereas you three, he pointed to Gohan, Goten, and Trunks, as half Saiyans, cannot sense it as well. So what is it already? Snapped Vegeta. Dear, let him talk, sighed Bulma. Vegeta scowled but said nothing. I'll have to ask. How you I believe. He called for Mr. Popo. Could you please bring young Harry out, please, Mr. Popo? Yes, Dend. He has just woken up. He is such a nice child, replied Mr. Popo. He walked away, and soon Na came back with a bundle of blankets, and he handed it over to Dend, and stood back. Guys, this is Harry, the little imp that's too damn powerful for his own good, Dend chuckled. The females all crowded round immediately, cooing and awing at the little baby. The guys stood back and watched, Goku staring at Vegeta, who had suddenly gone paler. He looked back to the child and gave a little cry of shock himself, causing the girls to turn their attention to the two pale Saiyans. What? They asked. Both Saiyans shakily pointed to Harry, causing them to turn round, and as one, jaws to drop to the floor. The blanket had slipped, and they could now clearly see he had a tail. You're kidding, right? Asked Gohan. I am not. In fact, I believe that Vegeta has something he should tell us, replied Dend. The whole group turned to stare at Vegeta, who was staring at Harry in shock, and shaking his head slightly, obviously trying to deny the boy was real. Honey? Asked a concerned Bulma. Vegeta looked at Dend, who nodded at the silent question, and, to the other's surprise, went up to Harry and took him in his arms, silent tears streaming down his face. The group looked at the usually cold man in shock, and looked to Dend, who sighed and decided to explain. There is something none of you know. Another Saiyan escaped the planet Vegeta's destruction, a girl. This girl's name was Kira. She landed on Earth, like Goku, and was raised under the name Lily Evans. The group's eyes widened in recognition, but it was Vegeta who dropped the final bombshell. That's not all. He choked. Kira was no normal Saiyan. She was my sister. 10 years later. Okay, important thing here. I am in need of your help, people. I don't know whether to make this a series and have Harry go through his Hogwarts years normally, or do something funky like have him crash through the doors with Brawley's son in an all-out Saiyan battle during 4th year. I might do the series, but any ideas will be appreciated. Well, on with the chapter. Uncle Goku. A small athletic-looking 10-year-old boy with long black hair tied in a ponytail came flying out from the Capsule Corp, home where he lived. He was very tall and muscled for his age. As Gohan usually said, he's like my clone from my age or something. The boy was one Harry James Potter, son of James and Lily Potter, or Kira Potter as it should have been. Lee had turned out to be Vegeta's little sister, whom he had believed had perished along with the rest of the Saiyan people. This was how he came to be where he was, living with his uncle Vegeta and his aunt Bulma. Both he thought of as his parents, and called them both so. Whoa, hey there kiddo, how you doing with your hocus pocus stuff? As Harry was Den's favorite wizard, although he refused to admit it, Den had personally taught Harry magic, and seeing he was the guardian of the earth, and had knowledge in almost all types of magic there was, Den had taught Harry a lot. He had been told that by the age of 18, he would be at a level of magic known as a white mage, which was one of the most powerful levels of magic in the wizarding world. Of course, with Harry, you would never expect him to hold the power he had, or have the knowledge he had gained. What with his carefree happy attitude, although having grown up with the Prince of Saiyans, he was extremely cunning and dangerous if provoked. Harry had discovered that the Saiyans had a type of mind magic of their own. Den discovered this the hard way when he tried to use Legilimcy on him, and had promptly been attacked by Harry's Uzaru form, which apparently protected Harry's mind, and he further shocked them by saying, "Oh, you mean Nira? Yeah, he talks with me sometimes, and he's really cool." When they had mentioned it to him. "Yay, but I'm bored. I've already done my homework, but Trunks won't train with me, and Vegeta's doing some private training," he pouted. "Well, why don't you invite Pan over? You know she's been wanting to see you all week," Goku replied, a hint of laughter in his voice. Both Pan and Harry were best friends, and he, and everyone else, knew that when they got older, they would become a lot closer. Heck, Vital and Chi-Chi had already started planning the wedding. Harry and Pan had fought together, especially when he, Trunks and the two of them had went on their search for the Black Star Dragon Balls. He frowned slightly as he remembered what happened during his battle with Baby. The monster had tried to kill Pan when she tried to get through to him when he was in his Uzaru form. Harry had thrown himself in front of the shot meant for her, and was badly injured. Pan's tears and the sight of the boy he considered as a grandson had made him change into a SS4. Ever since, Harry and Pan had been inseparable, and were never seen without the other nearby most times. He frowned, but Vital said that she was coming for my birthday, and not before. Harry always loved the holidays, and his birthday. It was when everyone gathered together, and had a great big party which involved stories, cake, presents, jokes, cake, music, games, and did we mention cake? Harry kiddo, it's your birthday tomorrow. And you saw her yesterday, you can't be that desperate to see her, he chuckled. Harry merely pouted, then went back into the house talking rapidly with Goku about his upcoming birthday, and everything else that had been happening. So Bra was ranting all yesterday, something about how some guy had dumped her for someone else. You know what she can be like, girls, I mean come on uncle Goku, it's like they're a whole different species or something, he ranted. Ah, but remember young Harry, that Pan is a girl as well, Goku smirked at him. Harry merely blinked and said, but yay, Pan's cool. If Pan acted like my sister does, I'd kill her myself. Goku laughed at that. Ah well, if there were no girls though Harry, we'd have to cook our own food by ourselves, and clean the houses and do the shopping and all that other junk, he laughed. Harry laughed along with Goku as they entered the kitchen, where Bulma was already preparing the food for the following day. She looked up and smiled warmly. Hey Goku, long time no see. How you doing? She asked as she gave him a hug. You know, same old, getting the food out already Bulma. That's a bit of a bad idea when you have a SAIY. And in 3 demi-Saiyans under the roof, he joked. She swatted at his arm. Well if they are you monsieur, Come near it, I'll stop cooking for a whole month, she threatened, pointing her finger at him. He raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, sheesh, is it me, Harry, or are women getting more vicious? He joked. Oh ha ha ha, Goku, she snorted as Harry giggled. Do me a favor and go get that husband of mine, would you? He's in his training room again. Sure. Hey, come on kiddo, let's see how the old dog's getting on. Harry and Goku entered the training room to see Vegeta just powering down, and taking a swig from his water bottle. Goku took a few loud joke sniffs, then coughed. Sheesh Vegeta, how long you been at it? Vegeta turned round and smirked at the other Saiyan. You know me Kakarot, all work then. More work makes me one happy Saiyan, he joked back. Thankfully, ever since Harry came, Vegeta had loosened up a lot and he and Goku got along much better, although he still called him Kakarot, which nobody really cared about. He looked at Harry and his smirk became a bit wider. Hey Runt, you show him what you can do. Goku looked at Harry, who looked confused, before realization dawned. Oh yay, I forgot to tell him Dad. Vegeta loved it when Harry called him Dad and Bulma Mum. It made him happy knowing he was looking out for his sister's child. Well, what are you waiting for? Show him, he chuckled. Harry went to the center of the room and closed his eyes, and taking a few deep breaths, before a golden aura sprung up around him, his hair turned golden yellow and the front sprung up in spic. Think Trunks when he powered up with his hair tied back, and his emerald green eyes turned turquoise. Well, this is my Super Saiyan, as you know. It might be a while before I can hit level 2 though, but I found a halfway point between 1 and 2 inches. He closed his eyes once again, and his aura flickered more violently, before it suddenly exploded. Goku watched as his muscles grew more bulky and large, his hair grew slightly longer. And his eyes were just blank white. He smirked, which made him seem a little more dangerous, and powered down, his hair resuming its previous black color. So what do you think, Uncle Goku? Goku had a silly grin on his face, which told Harry he was impressed. Well, I've gotta say kiddo, your powers are coming along nicely, eh? Few more months and you may actually reach the next level. Vegeta snorted and murmured something under his breath. Well, come on, we have a big day tomorrow, Runt, so let's go, and I still blame Trunks for convincing you to grow your hair so low. He grumbled as Harry smirked and tied his hair back in its usual ponytail. Meanwhile, in Britain, Albus, are you sure he's alive? No one had seen or heard anything about him. He could be dead for all we know, spoke Professor McGonagall. Have patience, my dear Professor. I have faith that he will turn up. Do not fret, replied Dumbledore. He was always angry when the subject of Potter was brought up. He wasn't under his control. And he hadn't been beaten and starved like he had planned for him to be, so he would be the boys' hero by getting him away from the Dursleys, and to make matters worse, he had only been able to steal from the Potter family vaults for a few years until someone talked to the goblins, and had all access to the vaults cut off, so well, in fact, even he himself could not figure out how to get the money back under his control. What was the name again? Dondra, Dindo, Dern, some weird name. The letter to the brat had been sent out, so all he could do was hope he would turn up. He had to find out with whom he had been staying with, get him under his control and send him back to the Dursleys. Even his most advanced tracking charms had failed to locate the stupid boy. First he had some business to take care of. He walked to the fire and flew to the burrow to talk with the Weasleys. He needed their son Ronald to befriend the boy and convince him that Slytherins are dark and evil. He wasn't too worried. After all, he was the son of 2 Gryffindors, and the boy who lived, what were the chances he would get into Slytherin? Little did he know, Harry was not only the son of 2 Gryffindors. He was the nephew of the Saiyan prince, and had been raised by him, and he was as cunning as they came. Birthdays and letters. Right, before I asked for some ideas on what to do and I've got it figured out. I am going to make it that Harry isn't going to Hogwarts for first year for 3 main reasons. 1, because I got something planned I hope you'll like. 2, because of the stage Harry's at Saiyan Wise. And 3, just to piss off Dumbles, hee. Oh, and as an afterthought, Ron and Hermione and maybe Blaise Zabin girl are gonna save the stone and it'll make Ron big-headed. Hee fireworks. By the way, an answer to one review. Yes, this is after GT and Goku does stay, but I've also got it. Some characters are alive, like BUU, so I can have more fun, like it says definitely. Oh. That said, Harry is going to like music. And some of the bands are from this year. He is gonna be rocker, and he will have a leather trenchcoat. So time is not really a factor in this story. To all THOs that have made the time to review my story, bless you, I like to know I'm doing this semi-right ha. Well, on with Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Harry lay fast asleep in his bed, his body sprawled out, and his covers wrapped around him like a toga, sleeping with thoughts on what his birthday was going to be like. While Harry slept, the rest of his family was already up and preparing for the birthday boy's special day. Bulma was working in the kitchen, Trunks and Bra were setting up their little brother's presents, and Vegeta, well, he was already planning a new workout for the boy. Now that he was a year older. So you think we should wake him now, Trunks, or should we wait till later? Bra asked her older brother. Trunks looked thoughtful for a second, before he gave smirk that proved who his father was. Nah, Bulla. I say we let Pan go wake him this year, he grinned. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a voice yelled out, hey, we're here. Come on in, guys, we're in the main room. Trunks yelled Gohan, Vital, Pan, Goten. Hercule and Boo came in, and before they got a chance to greet each other, Pan had rushed up the stairs towards Harry's room. Everyone looked at each other before laughing and exchanging greetings and starting up conversations. Meanwhile, upstairs, a pair of black eyes peeked through the door and stared at the figure inside. Dressed in her usual red tank top, Ray trouser with her orange bandana tied round her head, Pan slipped silently into her best friend's room. She walked quietly up to him and stared at the boy she had been thinking about a lot lately. She didn't know what to feel about him anymore. On the one hand, he was her best friend, the boy she'd grown up with, but on the other hand, they were getting older, and Pan felt that she would like to have a deeper relationship than friends. She had a flashback, and could almost perfectly remember that moment, when that dark beam of energy was about to hit her. Harry appeared from nowhere, bloodied and beaten from his fight before, his clothes in tatters. That moment she felt like time had stopped. Harry just appeared, his arms raised to shield her, and when the beam hit him, a stray tear made its way down her cheek. He had screamed so loudly, and when his body lay there, unmoving, she felt as if a part of her soul had been ripped out of her. She had held him, demanded him to get up, to not leave her. But he wouldn't respond. That memory had haunted her for years. She used to have nightmares, in where he hadn't survived that shot, and she felt so guilty. She jumped as a hand wiped the tears from her eyes, and stared down into Harry's emerald eyes, which were laced with concern. She gave a weak smile and dried her eyes. Hey, I'm here, she smiled. Harry just lay back down and smiled. He knew that she would talk with him when she was ready. Damn, that's the piece shattered now, ain't it? He joked, which earned him a laugh and a slap on the arm. Hey, there's no peace in this house with you and Vegeta living here. I feel sorry for Bulma, she shot back. He scowled at her before he grabbed her and pulled her down, ignoring her shriek of, Harry. He proceeded to tickle her, laughing as he did so. They came downstairs a while later, and the adults all greeted Harry, wishing him a happy birthday, and he smiled to himself. Tonight was going to be great. Later, Harry's party was in full swing. Everyone had come and he was having the best time ever. He had talked with almost everyone, and he and Pan had also pranked Vegeta, Goten, Trunks and Krillin. He was currently having a conversation with Boo. Well, more like an argument. I'm telling you, Boo, chocolate is the best food of all time, Harry argued. Boo shook his head. Nope, he said in his high-pitched childlike voice, chocolate good, cake better. Nah, he replied. Bu replied. Nah, and they argued back and forth, while Pan sat at the side with Marin and Bra, talking about girly things and laughing at Harry and Boo, who were heads together and leader lally in each other's faces arguing over food. Right, Harry, Boo, enough, Bulma interrupted loudly. Both turned to her, then looked back to each other. Faced Bulma again and stuck out their tongues, which caused everyone watching to laugh, Bulma included. Well, fine, if you don't want to open your presents, be that wah. She was cut off as Harry zoomed by her towards the pile of presents that had been given. Opening the presents was fun. He got a sword, made of silver, from Trunks, clothes from some of the others, sweets from Boo and Hercule, a set of daggers from Gohan and Vidal. Pan got him a silver ring, which he loved, and she also, to the others' amusement, got him a black bandana, which was lined with silver, and from Godin he got an MP3 player. Actually it was a Zen Touch, and it already had all his favorite albums on it, from bands like Trivium, Avenged Sevenfold, Atreyu, Bullet for My Valentine and most of the other rock metal music he loved. His dad also gave him a leather. His last gift, however, he loved. It was from Dend. Now Harry, since you're powerful enough, we believe you will make better use of this, Dend said. With that he handed over a beautiful staff. The staff was made out of cherry wood, but was dark in color, and anyone was hit by it would know that it was as hard as steel. On the foot of the staff was a silver metal covering shaped into a point. But on the top was the most beautiful crystal Harry had ever seen. It was emerald green, like his eyes, and it was surrounded by an aura that showed the power it held. He took it with gentle hands, and was startled by a jolt that ran through his whole body, and he felt a rush of power so strong he dropped to his knees. People moved forward to help him, but Dend halted them. Stop. This is meant to happen. The staff is bonding to him, so nobody else may use it, and Harry may call it whenever he needs. They stopped but still looked at Harry in concern. He stood slowly, and gave a mock glare towards Dend. Thanks so much for the warning, old boy, he spoke in a mock British accent. Dend just shook his head, a smile on his face. Harry turned to his staff when he had a sudden idea. He took off his ring from Pan, and began dancing his fingers around it, murmuring under his breath. He then moved to his staff and began tracing some runes, which glowed red, and murmured a little faster. There was a flash of light, and Harry's staff was gone. What you do to it? Asked a shocked Hercule. He did obviously know of magic, but saying Harry do magic that powerful still shocked him. Harry smirked, and held his right hand out, the one his ring was on, and in another flash of light, the staff reappeared again. Saves me the bother of carrying the thing about, he replied. He was about to thank Dend when suddenly an owl swooped down, and dropped a letter on the table in front of him. Everyone stared in shock, while Harry lifted his hand over it to scan it. He could see and sense the auras of spells, and he knew to always check his letters in case of traps. He blamed Nira for making him paranoid. His Uzaru form was actually in a dormant state, so he hadn't talked to his other half in months. He frowned. There was a portkey charm on it. He turned to Dend, who nodded and waved his hand over it. He picked up the letter and opened it. Inside was a thick piece of parchment. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin. First Class, Grand Sork. CHF. Warlock. Supreme Mugwump. International Confed. Of Wizards. He laughed out loud at that. Mugwump. Who would want to put that in a letter? He stopped short though as he looked at the name. Dumbledore. Ah yes, now this would be interesting. He knew of course, everything that this leader of the light had tried to do to him. Force him into a home where it was ensured he'd be beaten and starved. He'd tried to steal from his family vaults as well, before Dend got in contact with Lord Ragnarok, the head of Gringotts and the Goblin Nation, and closed off his vault to everyone but himself. He himself got on great with the goblins, he respected them and they him. So any goblin would recognize his authorization, so there was no chance in hell anyone could forge their way into his accounts. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on the 1st of September. We await your owl by no later than the 31st of July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry blinked. Hogwarts was in England. Why were they so desperate to get him to attend? He smacked himself on the head. Of course, Dumbledore would W. And the boy who lived to be his beacon of hope to the wizarding world, ha. He was a Saiyan, one of the royal blood. There was no way in hell he was going to let some ancient old has-been to control him. Well Harry, what is it? Pan asked. He scowled, and waved his hand to conjure a pen and some paper. He bent down and scribbled a quick note. To Deputy Headmistress McGonagall, I'm sorry to say that I will not be attending Hogwarts School, as I am home tutored, and live pretty far from England. Both my legal guardians agree with my choice to continue working with my mentor. Yours sincerely, Harry J. Potter. His parents meanwhile had read the letter and both had scowls on their faces. Both would like to meet this Albus Dumbledore and kick his ass to Pluto and back. Harry gave a shrill whistle and after a flash of flames a white phoenix appeared on his shoulder. Harry stroked his familiar softly, earning him a happy chirp from the bird. Nyx had been a friend of Goku, before she bonded to Harry. Here Nyx, take this to Minerva McGonagall, don't wait for a reply, he spoke to her. She nodded her head and disappeared in a flash of flames. Harry turned back to the crowd, and gave a large smile. Well, come on then. Is this a party or what? Everyone just laughed at his antics and the party started full swing again. Pan came over to him. So what was that letter about? She whispered. He looked around before replying in a hushed voice. Hogwarts, a magical school in England. Dumbledore's the headmaster there. The letter was a portkey before Den cancelled it for me. He's getting desperate. Pan frowned prettily. Her cute nose scrunched up in thought. Wait, what? He shook his head. When did he think of Pan like that? She was his best friend, for God's sake. Damn Godin for putting alcohol in his drink. Meanwhile, Hogwarts. And that concludes our meeting. Dumbledore finished. The teachers were discussing the upcoming security for the Philosopher's Stone. Just as the teachers stood up, they were interrupted by a flash of fire and the appearance of a beautiful white phoenix. The phoenix glided over to a shocked McGonagall and dropped a piece of parchment before disappearing in a flash of flames. Shaky. McGonagall picked up the parchment and unfolded it. She read through it and at the end, she paled and sat down in her seat in shock. Is everything all right, Minerva? What is it? Asked Dumbledore. Albus, she spoke. Albert shakily. It's from Harry Potter. Immediately everyone burst out yelling, asking questions and trying to see the letter for themselves. Silence. Dumbledore yelled. The teachers all became quiet as Dumbledore looked at the letter, before frowning. Minerva, Severus, stay behind. The rest of you may go, he spoke quaintly. When the others were gone, both teachers rounded on the headmaster. Albus, what does he mean he won't come? He simply must. We need him. The wizarding world needs him. Minerva rambled. So, sneered Snape, famous Harry Potter thinks he's too important to go to school. Just like his arrogant father. Indeed, Severus, this is most disturbing, Dumbledore replied. Damn that boy. He thought angrily. Who does he think he is? Saying no to me, he will come to this school. I will not have it, and how the hell did he know about the portkey charm? My plans will not fail, he will be my pawn and will do what I tell him to. We shall have to try and find him. We now know that he is alive somewhere, he simply must be found. It's for the greater good, Dumbledore concluded. She's a what? Also, I am going to have Pan and family's last names to be Son. Because I don't know their actual last names. So ladies and gents, I give you chapter 5. She's a what? Clang. The sound of metal hitting metal echoed through the never-ending room. The sound emitted from a shining metal sword and its opponent, a gleaming silver sword. The two sweaty, heavy-breathing opponents stared at each other, emerald green and terry black, searching each other for a weakness. Or something that would give the other an advantage. With a ringing sound they both drew their swords away from each other, and jumped back in opposite directions. 12 years old Harry Potter stared at his older brother, searching for a flaw in his technique, and trying to ignore that damn white light that surrounded him, or the fact his body was saying, "Stop you fucking ass." Ever since he had got his sword, Trunks had practically mauled him and forced him to learn how to wield it properly, which is how he ended up where he was now, in the time chamber. He had spent a lot of time in here, mainly working on his magic core and keeping his body in top shape. The weird thing about the time chamber now was that you could spend 2 years in here, while it was 24 hours outside, and your body would not age the time you spent in there. When they were told of the changes Mr. Popo had made, they had stared at him in shock, and the genie merely shrugged and said he was bored one day. It was already on a year onwards since he had got his Hogwarts letter, and his and Trunks's 2 years were almost done. His thoughts were interrupted when Trunks made a movement. He sank back into his defensive position, but was surprised when Trunks merely slipped his sword back into its scabbard. I give he yelled out. Harry sighed in thanks. This particular fight had been going on at least 4 days, and he was close to giving in himself. He walked back to the kitchen, where the food was already waiting for him. The Saiyans all blessed Mr. Popo for having some magic installed, the best being infinite food of all types. And whatever you asked was made and served in seconds. He and Trunks ate until they were full basically. They ate the same as America's entire food supply and without a word, went straight to their beds. And promptly passed out on them. 2 days later, an extremely well-rested Harry got out of bed. He walked to the kitchen to find his brother already there, packing some of his things into the backpack he had brought with him. So when do we leave? Harry asked. About an hour I think. Here, since we're leaving we'll stick with the sensu beans, he replied, handing the small green bean to Harry, who ate it without complaint and went back to his room to pack. Of course, unlike poor Trunks, he packed his things with a wave of his hand, and smirked at the thought of Trunks just spending over an hour packing his things. He sat down on the steps and pulled out his Zen Touch. Ooh, did he love this thing. He had used a spell so that the battery lasted forever, it couldn't be damaged in any way. It wasn't affected by magic, but the best, he could get any album by any artist by asking for it. Which was handy for him when he was in the time chamber, otherwise he'd be bored to tears with the same old songs. He switched in on, and nodded his head along to Avenged Sevenfold's, Chapter 4 Feet. Ever since he had heard some of these bands, he actually learned how to play guitar and drums, and was glad he did. Some of these bands' riffs were frickin' great. He smirked slightly, remembering when Pan had walked in on him. He was pushing himself to the extreme on guitar, so he had play Through the Fire and Flames, by Dragonforce. Damn. It was a frickin' hard one to play. Pan had been so amazed she had demanded him to teach her. How he wished he was 15, because then hopefully his voice would be deep enough for him to roar properly. Hell yay. He decided long ago he'd form a rock band. His eyes glazed over slightly. His all-time dream was to tour with Metallica, or Trivium, or another of the great bands he listened to. His daydream was interrupted when Trunks slapped him over the back of the head. He pulled out his earphones and scowled towards a smirking Trunks. All right, we're good to go, come on. He stood and stretched, his back cracking nicely. Before he summoned his bag and followed his brother out of the chamber, he took one last look around, before stepping outside of the door. He looked around. Weird. Where is everyone? They were here for when we went in, and Mr. Popo and Dend usually greet us when we come out. He looked towards Trunks, who shrugged, and they walked off towards the main room. Dend, Mr. P. Hey, where is everyone? He called. He opened the door only to be tackled to the ground by someone. Preparing himself, Harry expertly flipped the unknown person off of him, before flipping onto his own feet, sword out and pointed at Harry. You goddamn prat. Pan. His sweat dropped slyly, before letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding, and attached his sword back to his side. He smiled sheepishly at the really pissed off looking girl. Well, sorry, I didn't expect to be jumped at like that. After being with him, he jerked his thumb towards Trunks, who had been on the floor laughing his ass off. For 2 years, your nerves are usually stuck on high mode, he scowled. Sewer, she huffed. All right, I'll let you off this time. But only because we got something to tell you, she finished, her excited smile back on her face. Looking around, Harry noticed Gohan, Vital, Dend and Mr. Popo for the first time. All looked amused at the incident he had almost got himself into. Oh, and what would that be, my dear? He smirked. He usually called her that, mainly because he thought it was funny, and a bonus, it annoyed her. She scowled at him. Shut it, goth boy. She smirked at the name, and Harry scowled this time. Anyways, she continued, guess what? Ooh, here, look at this. She handed him a heavy letter, which looked suspiciously familiar. He opened it, and ignoring the bit at the top he stared at the main part of the letter, and to say he was shocked was an understatement. Dear Miss Sun, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry stopped reading at that, the clogs in his brain grinding to a halt. Pan, Hogwarts, Pan, Witch, what the bloody hell, he mumbled before looking up at his best friend. He looked back down to the letter. checking it was real, and looked back to Pan. He laughed and opened his arms, letting Pan jump into them as he swung her around, both laughing happily. Holy shit, you're a witch. Dend, how the hell did we not see this? Harry laughed. You know, I'd like to know that too, Dend. Gohan asked. Where would she get magic from? Dend seemed to grow more tired before their very eyes, as he let out a sigh and looked towards Gohan and Vidal. Well, there are two reasons I know of. One being that there was magic users AF.EU generations ago on your mother's side of the family. Vidal, he spoke to her. And the other? Vidal asked. Dend stared between the couple, before taking a deep breath. He turned towards Harry. Harry, could you call Vegeta and ask him and Bulma to come here? He asked. Harry frowned in confusion, but nodded and closed his eyes, using his telepathy to call Vegeta. A few minutes later, Vegeta, Bulma and Goku appeared. Thanks to Goku's instant translocation. What's wrong, kid? He asked, both looking concerned. He was sweaty, so was Goku, so Harry guessed they were sparring when he called. Harry shrugged, before nodding towards Dend, who indicated for them to follow. Harry and Pan were about to follow, but Dend halted them. I'm afraid you two must remain out here. It is not time for you to hear this yet, he murmured. Pan opened her mouth to protest, but halted when she felt Harry's hand on her arm. Turning, she saw as he shook his head once. She scowled but sighed and nodded. Mr. Popo, keep an eye on these two for a while, could you? Dend murmured to the genie. He nodded, and led them to their favorite room, the training room. Now, you can stay and play in here until your parents are done, and remember, he trailed off. We were never here, they both finished with a smile. They owed Mr. Popo for letting them use this room, when normally they shouldn't be allowed. They believed Dend knew, otherwise Mr. Popo wouldn't actually let them be here. Pan turned to Harry. So why didn't you let me try to get in? She scowled. Pan, I trust Dend. Maybe it's because of the time I've spent with him, but I trust him with my life. Please, trust me, Dend isn't keeping us out for the fun of it, he finished softly. She scowled, obviously wanting to know what was being said, but sighed and nodded her head. Fine, but I'm going to take this out on you, she smirked, a spark that spelled trouble appearing in her black eyes. Bring it on, sweetheart, bring it on, Harry smirked, shedding his trench coat and leaving him in his skin-tight t-shirt and black shorts. Pan seemed to freeze slyly, as she stared at Harry in his shorts and t-shirt, but shook her head before leaping to the other end of the room and taking her defensive position. Main rule, no power-ups, she yelled. Harry nodded, and the fight was on. Half an hour later, both Harry and Pan stumbled out of the room, sweaty, breathing hard, yet happy. They walked towards the main room, where the adults were now sitting looking thoughtful, yet didn't seem that upset, thankfully. But just Pan's luck, she missed a step on the stairs down, and fell. Grabbing poor unsuspecting Harry, and pulling him down with her, they both tumbled down the last few steps before landing together in a heap, groaning in pain. The adults were shamelessly laughing at them, and laughed even more at the way they had landed. Harry was currently on his back, his long hair messed up everywhere, and on top of him lay Pan, whose face was almost inches from his. And both were staring into each other's eyes for a few seconds, before slowly moving closer. Pan, get off of Harry, you lazy bum, Trunks yelled. Both instantly got up, blushing fiercely, which made the others laugh harder. Right, Pan, it's all sorted, you can go to Hogwarts, Vidal smiled. Pan instantly hugged her mother, then her father. Now, I happen to know that Hogwarts is one of the best schools in the world. Regardless of who's headmaster, she scowled slightly as she said the last part. But you shouldn't have any problems, and your mother and I want the best for you, and with Dend still working with Harry. And at a very advanced level at that, we feel it would be better for you at Hogwarts, and there will be more kids your age there you can befriend. Gohan explained. I'll miss not being here. But I understand why I can't get taught along with Harry, but I don't want to lose my training as well, Pan frowned. Hey, no worries, Harry said quickly, when you're back next summer, me and you will go into the chamber and fix you back up, yay. He half expected the adults to outright refuse the idea, but was surprised when Gohan nodded in acceptance. Harry's right, it will be a good way to get you back in shape. And Harry can help you move on with your training, he said thoughtfully. So it's official. Pan smiled. I'm going to Hogwarts. God help that school, they won't know what hit them, Harry muttered. Everyone laughed again as Pan stuck her tongue out at Harry. Done. Ha, well, I think I've got the next few chapters sorted out, but don't expect an update until Monday 22nd cause I've got work. Bah, my story, or money. It's a cruel choice. Review me. You really wanna piss this guy off. You really wanna piss this guy off. It was only a few months until Pan came back from her first year at Hogwarts. She had sent letters weekly to tell them what was happening. Harry himself got at least 2 letters a week. Being Pan's best friend, she usually went to him for advice, or just someone she could talk to. He would always pick on her, make snide comments about her and take house points off her for the silliest of reasons. Harry knew, of course, of Snape's history with his real father, James. So couldn't help but wonder what he would have been treated like if he had went to Hogwarts. Pan also had some disturbing news to tell. Apparently, there had been some attacks that had left some students petrified. Even the Gryffindor ghost had been petrified, which worried him greatly. If he was correct in guessing what creature had caused this, there was going to be big problems at Hogwarts. Pan had kept a closer contact with Harry ever since the last student had been petrified, and that student happened to be Hermione. Pan had been really scared and upset about what had happened to her best friend. And she and Blaise had always stuck close together ever since. However, what Harry found amusing was that apparently, there were 2 guys in second year who had been causing some problems for her. One was a guy called Draco Malfoy, a Slytherin, who had been getting at Pan for her parentage, and kept calling her a mudblood and other such names. He had of course, changed his tune when one day, Pan turned round and smacked him straight on the nose, and she boasted that even to this day, his nose was still squint from when she hit it. Apparently even magic couldn't fix some things. The other though was a guy whom he would personally like to introduce his fist to. Ron Weasley, a Gryffindor. Apparently, last year he had overheard the spirit of Lord Voldemort ordering the defense teacher, Quirrell, to make more of an effort to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and had went squealing to Dumbledore to tell him, after which Dumbledore confronted Quirrell and banished Voldemort's spirit out of him, which caused him to die instantly. Voldemort had, of course, fled. Weasley had obviously became well known, and became really big-headed because of it. He acted like he ruled Hogwarts and that everyone else were lower than him. And he also claimed that he was in love with Pan. Now that pissed Harry off. The hell would Pan ever date a retarded little shit like Weasley, but he was really pissed about him going about saying things like, "We were meant to be. She's the future Mrs. Weasley, and she's going to be the mother of our kids." Harry let out a sigh. For some reason, he had began to feel different about Pan. He had found himself thinking about her a lot, which worried him. She was his best friend, and he was scared if he tried to explore a deeper relationship, she would flat out reject him. Or it would destroy their entire friendship. And he wouldn't allow that if he could help it. And besides, she was only 11 herself, and he 12, which was far too young for them to be dating. So he decided to leave it for a while. He looked at his watch, and let out a sigh. He had some training that needed done. He decided to go to his home in Scotland. It belonged to the Potter family, as did the surrounding acres of land, all of which were in a deep and secluded valley where nobody could see him. The wards there helped as well. Hogwarts. Pan was walking towards the nearest bathroom she knew of, and let out a deep yawn as she walked. The last few weeks had been murder for her sleep patterns, what with studying, visiting Hermione with Blaise, hanging out with Blaise, and more studying. She was damn tired. And what was worse, Snape had set a very hard homework assignment due for the day after tomorrow, and with these darn rules due to attacks, she couldn't get enough time in the library. Damn, she hated Snape. She scowled as she walked by the writing on the wall, where Mrs. Norris was attacked, and the start of all this mess began at. Weasley had tried to use these attacks as an excuse to be near her, claiming he was trying to protect her. He eventually backed off after Blaise gave him a kick in the nuts. Slytherins were vindictive bastards. She walked into the bathroom and paused, staring at the sinks in confusion, or at least, where the sinks usually sat. They were wide apart, and she just had enough time to see a figure with red hair slide on into the opening usually covered by the sinks. She watched as they slowly began to close. Hell with it, she thought, and jumped down just before the sinks closed back up. She took her time and floated down, giving whoever was ahead of her time to move on, and she hopefully wouldn't be spotted. She arrived at the bottom of the long tunnel, and looked around the small chamber. There were dead rat skeletons everywhere. She continued on, floating until she came to a door that looked like a vault door. Thankfully it was slightly open, so she carefully opened it and slid in. She looked around the huge room. It was lined with serpent statues, and at the very end stood a statue of Wizard, whom she guessed was Salazar Slytherin. Damn, he was an ugly old geezer. With a jolt of shock, she realized that she was standing in the Chamber of Secrets. She looked around before spotting a limp body with red hair, and she paused. She recognized that girl, Ginny Weasley, Ron's little sister. Without a thought, she ran up to her and dropped beside her. She rolled her over to get a good look at her. She didn't look good. She was as pale as a ghost, and her breathing was shallow. She had to get her out of here fast. Without a thought, she picked up the lighter girl, and flew back up the tunnel. She had to get to Dumbledore. Unknown to Pan, a figure stood in the shadows, and watched her take the girl and leave. The dark figure smirked and followed them out of the chamber. Great Hall. Albus Dumbledore was not in a good mood. A student had been taken into the Chamber of Secrets, and he still did not know where it was, or even what the monster was. He stood in front of the Great Hall, which was silent and waiting to hear what he had to say. Students of Hogwarts, I have some very grave news. Earlier this evening, we discovered another message underneath that of the first message. It is with a heavy heart I tell you that a member of the student body has been taken directly into the Chamber of Secrets. He paused, and waited for the outcries and gasps of horror to subside before he continued. I am afraid that we have no other choice but to close down Hogwarts. For it has become to Dangaro as to keep open. He whispered in a sad voice, although he may have some problems, he truly did love Hogwarts, and did not want it closed if he could help it. He opened his mouth to continue, when he was interrupted by a shout. Headmaster! I need help! Came a yell from the back of the hall. Everyone turned to see a pale Pan holding a horribly pale Ginny Weasley. Dumbledore and the teachers immediately rushed forwards, ordering the students to stay seated, and began to examine the girl. Dumbledore was mumbling long spells under his breath, trying to find out what was wrong with this girl. Headmaster, whispered a pale Madame Pomfrey. Her vitals are dropping. Something is killing her. Dumbledore looked up in alarm. Before a flash of fear went through his eyes, he turned back to Ginny and let out a long incantation. And she glowed white, showing her aura to the whole hall, but what made them panic was the black tendril that seemed to surround her, feeding of her magic. Voldemort, a shocked Dumbledore whispered. That would be me, yes, came a dark voice from the doorway. Everyone looked round to stare at a young-looking man, who looked to be about 5th year. McGonagall immediately let out a small scream, recognizing the younger Voldemort, and moved the children to the opposite end of the hall, the teachers following her, and standing protectively in front of the students, wands pointed at Voldemort. So Tom, Dumbledore spoke, I see that we underestimated you once again. Tom sneered, Old man, you do not really think that a weakling such as yourself can comprehend what I, Lord Voldemort, heir of the great Salazar Slytherin, am truly capable of possessing. He let out a dark laugh that echoed inside the great hall. Stupefy, yelled Dumbledore. The red spell raced towards an idle Voldemort, who had a lazy smile on his face. The spell passed through him and he laughed again. I am not truly alive, you pathetic fool, but soon, Lord Voldemort shall be, and I will be stronger and more powerful than ever. He froze, and raised his hand, and stared at it. He let out another laugh, which froze the hall in fear. At last, my time has come, I am truly alive, he whispered to himself. Although the whole hall could hear him, he looked towards Ginny Weasley, who was no longer breathing, and smiled. Ah, but I cannot allow my little Ginevra to die, so I leave you, my dear, with some of your life force. You shall live, he murmured, a spark flashing in his eyes. Said Ginny Weasley, began to breathe softly again, and Madame Pomfrey immediately began to tend to her. Pan had had enough. This bastard was pissing her off. and was responsible for her best friend to be petrified, the hell was she going to stand by and let him off? She began to walk toward Tom Riddle, ignoring the teachers yelling at her to come back. She stopped and stood staring at the boy, no, thing in front of her. Well, 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 what have we here? Smirked and amused Voldemort, before he paused and stumbled back slightly, shaking his head. Ah, a relative of that moron Goku are you, child? He hissed. Pan froze. How did this faggot know about Gramps? His granddaughter actually, she replied in amusement. Ah, so you'll be Gohan's child. Who knew the brat had it in him? He smirked. Pan ground her teeth, before allowing a smirk of her own to appear, and she powered up. Dumbledore and the students and teachers watched as Pan casually talked with the Dark Lord, before she tensed up, and a white aura exploded around her, ruffling her hair and robes as though in an imaginary wind. What the hell was going on? Dumbledore frowned. He had heard of people who had great fighting powers and were experts in martial arts, and this was the first time he had ever saw one in person. He honestly did not know what to do. Voldemort, to the shock of the hall, only smiled slightly. That's it. I expected better. He laughed. Before tensing himself, and a dark sickly red and black aura sprang up around him, much to Pan's shock. Pan knew she was in trouble, but got ready to fight anyway. You shall be the first to fall before me, Voldemort hissed evilly, before rushing to a surprised Pan, and punching her in the stomach to wind her. He then brought his foot up hard, which caught her in the face as she bent forward. She let out a yell and flew upwards, before Voldemort appeared above her and smashed her back towards the ground, where she landed with a crash. Ha! He yelled, and the students and teachers watched in horror as a dark red beam of energy flew down and smashed in Pan. Think an evil version of Kamehameha. The hall could only watch as a bloody Pan staggered to her knees coughing up blood. He was simply too powerful for her. As a last resort, Pan grabbed the amulet Harry had given her. It was an automatic link to Harry's mind. She touched her thumb to it, and whispered one word. Help, Scotland. Harry was just about to start his training. He had been living in the wilderness of his land for a few days, and was getting ready to work out some more. Suddenly, he began to feel something was wrong, terribly wrong, like a part of him was dying. He didn't know what it was, but he was worried now. He froze, his senses going into overdrive. There was something very dark and very powerful somewhere, but it had just suddenly appeared, which scared Harry slightly. He was just about to grab his sword when he heard a voice in his head. Help! Harry froze. That voice. Without another thought, Harry raised his two main fingers to his head, thanking Goku for teaching him this, and he disappeared. Back at Hogwarts, a smirking Tom Riddle stood looking down at a battered and bloody Pan. Her clothes were in tatters and she was in no position to fight him now. He let out a laugh and leveled his hand at her. This is what happens to those who dare challenge the might of Lord Voldemort, he called to the audience, who could only watch in fear. Voldemort took a breath about to finish off the girl before he froze. Everyone in the hall froze with him, and for good reason. Hogwarts was shaking very hard. A student let out a scream and pointed to the ceiling, where everyone looked. The sky outside, it was turning black, and bolts of blue lightning were flashing about everywhere. Just as Voldemort gained his wits, and aimed his hand at Pan again, he was cut off as the great hall doors suddenly exploded, flying off their hinges and crashing onto the floor, causing the students to scream in fear. Touch her, and die, growled a deep and very pissed off sounding voice. Everyone turned to look at the newcomer, and a few people screamed, some fainted, and Dumbledore, Snape, and Voldemort's jaws dropped to the floor. There stood a male with a golden aura of power surrounding him, his eyes a turquoise blue, and his hair stood in golden spikes, defying gravity itself. But what everyone was shocked at was the scar on his forehead. A lightning bolt scar. Harry Potter had come to Hogwarts. I'm here, you're here, let's dance, bitch. Remember, I am a newbie. This is my very first story, so yes, expect mistakes and errors. Most will be simple, but I ain't using Microsoft Word or anything cause my computer is a bit retarded, so hey. And this has taken some time, mainly because after I finished the last chapter, it hit me. I have no clue how to write a fight scene, grins sheepishly. So I am writing one as best as I can do. Mainly because I don't wanna piss off people who are reading this story. And as I have said again and again, I am new to this. This is an O, so yes, some stuff might not make sense, but I will do what I can to keep it within reason. So here you are, Chapter 7. I'm here, now hold still so I can kick your ass. The student population of Hogwarts could only stare in shock and fear at the boy who lived but was believed to be dead. For years it had been said he was kidnapped and killed, yet there he was, very much alive, and very powerful looking. It was obvious this was a guy whose bad side should never be crossed. If you had enough common sense to realize that Tom or Voldemort was staring at the boy in absolute shock, he knew from his connection to his older self that the boy was still alive. But neither he or his older self expected the boy to be anything like this. He of course knew that his present self was already on his way here so they could become one, but he didn't know if he would survive until he got here. Dumbledore was also in shock. He never believed the boy would ever hold such power so early in his LFE. Damn it, he was meant to be the tamed, he was to look to him as his savior, not be like this. Harry stood in the doorway, already powered to his Super Saiyan level. His hands were clenched so tightly they were shaking, and his bones were creaking in protest at the pressure. He looked around the hall, and his eyes landed on a black-haired boy. He was standing in front of a bloodied-looking pan, and his anger only increased. He looked at the boy and stared into his eyes. He felt his scar twitch slightly. He narrowed his eyes. This was the power he had felt, the evil. And he was a little surprised that it was Voldemort. He smirked slightly. He never expected Voldemort to look like this. He was expecting some demon-like monster. Tom shook his head slightly. Before he spoke, well. Harry Potter. We meet at last. Harry's right eye twitched slightly. Tom continued, blissfully ignorant to Harry's growing anger. So Potter, I must admit I never expected you to have so much power. He spat. He knew that this boy was powerful. He was slightly worried of the potential this boy had. If he wanted to, he could probably destroy this very planet without breaking a sweat. Harry began stalking towards Tom, and the entire hall stood as far back as they could, keeping their distance between the two enemies. Dumbledore frowned. He knew there was not much he could do here, so he stood in front of the students, making sure they were all there, and set up the strongest shield he knew of. Harry remained ignorant to the light blue shield of magic that appeared behind Tom. His eyes were set on the filth he was going to rip apart with his bare hands. He continued to move towards the now slightly worried boy. He stopped, his nose inches from Tom's. I am only going to say this once, his deep voice growled, the entire hall listening with rapt attention. Lay one more finger on my best friend, and I will rip you apart, one limb at a time, and I will make it as slow as possible, he growled. Tom stumbled back in shock at the threat. Oh really? He smirked, still trying to act superior. He lifted his leg and let out a kick aimed towards Pan's face. The smirk soon disappeared when his leg was halted, and he noticed that the boy was now looking pissed. He looked down and gulped as he saw his leg caught in the grip of the boy. He let out a yelp of shock as he was lifted from the floor and flung harshly into the wall. The whole hall gasped in shock as they watched Harry Potter grab the young Voldemort's leg so fast it was a blur, and without a twitch of effort, flung him into the wall. Harry looked down at Pan, who was smiling gratefully at him, and helped her up. Hey, long time no see, she joked, but her smile faded as she took in the serious look on his face. You and me will be having a long talk when this is over, he growled slig. HTLY, why did you even try and fight him? You knew he was more powerful than you. She hung her head slightly. I didn't want to call you when I could have done something, she mumbled. I know how much you wanted to avoid Dumbledore. His face softened slightly before he smirked. All right, I'll let you off this time, but you know I would rather have you safe than being found by Dumbledore. She hugged him tighter in response, and accepted the sensu bean he handed her. Behind that shield with you, Missy, he smiled. I'll take care of Wannabe over there. She smiled at him before walking towards the shield, where an opening appeared thanks to Dumbledore, and walked in to turn and watch the fight that was about to start. Tom stood up with a hiss of pain, and glared at the boy. You won't get that, Lou. CKY again, Potter, he growled. Harry just smirked in response. Please, who needs luck against a weakling like you? Tom turned red in anger, before throwing an energy ball at Harry, who merely smiled. And caught the ball in his hand and began tossing it up and down like a baseball. "Ooh, I'm so scared, what's the big bad boy going to do now?" he drawled in mock fear, crushing the ball in his hand. Tom let out a yell and ran towards Harry, and let his fist fly straight into his face, and he let out a triumphant yell, but stopped when he looked at him. Harry stood, still in the same position, a smirk on his face. Apparently ignorant of the fist that had just hit him. "Ouch, the pain," he mocked. He grabbed the shocked Tom's arm and threw him towards the doorway, but whoops, he misaimed and Tom flew through the wall next to the doorway and outside. Harry made a show of shaking his head in exasperation, before floating outside onto the grounds, where a battered-looking Tom was trying to stand. "Are you even trying here? Come on," he mocked. Tom stood, holding his arm, glaring daggers at the young Saiyan. "Can you do better than those petty eye looks?" Harry asked. "Come on, you aren't even intimidating." He spotted the students and faculty coming outside to watch from the corner of his eye. "What the hell? Why did Dumbledore allow them to come out? Stupid idiots. I see I made a mistake underestimating you, boy," Tom snarled. "You may defeat me, but Lord Voldemort shall live on, and I will destroy you." Harry shook his head, a slight smile on his lips. "Well, since we're talking, I have K's tie-ons for you, old boy," he said in a happy tone. He powered back down, his hair black and his eyes green again. Tom spat some blood onto the ground, before looking warily back at him. "Well, first of all, how the hell do you know about Goku?" Tom smirked slightly. "That would be with the reason I can use Ki. You see, in one of my future rituals, I was able to form a link into hell, and met some why interesting friends of his down there." Harry and Pan's eyebrows raised at the same time, both shocked he was actually answering them, and that he had been in contact with some of the old enemies of Goku's. Wouldn't he happen to be guys like Frieza and Cell and the likes, would it? Harry asked. Tom merely nodded his head. "I can sense there is something else going on with you, otherwise your KN knowledge and level of power would not be what it is," Harry asked, looking serious. "So you can sense it," Tom said, looking bored. "Fine, I'm sure you know all about that baby thing from a few years ago." "Well, my future self found one of his egg things in the body he was possessing at the time, and managed to gain the power and knowledge of it from the egg. Of course he couldn't be controlled. So he went around muggles, getting more power and stuff from the other eggs he found, hence becoming more powerful, and he now has the ability to use his ki properly." Harry murmured. "So, how come you know what he does?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "He is me, so I know what he knows, but I do not have the power or experience of my future self." "So your future self holds a lot more power than yourself?" he asked, slightly worried, because although Tom had no experience, he had a lot of power, and if Voldemort had even more power, and the experience to go with it, well shit. "Yep." He seemed to smirk slightly, before he paled suddenly and looked back at Harry, alarmed. Harry smirked. "Whatever's wrong, dear Tom? Has your future self told you of his little problem?" His smirk got wider. "Damn you, boy, how did you know?" he yelled, looking extremely scared. "Please, it was so obvious you were distracting me for a reason," he laughed slightly. "Spirit barriers are wonderful, aren't they?" Tom began to shake in fury, before he charged up his power, and rushed forward again. He began to throw punches and kicks in a vain attempt to hit him. Harry just easily dodged the slow attacks, before he finally hit back. He was shocked when Tom caught his fist, and rammed his fist a lot harder than before into his face, throwing him to the ground. He flipped back up and used an PPER cut on Tom's chin to throw him into the air, and he flew after him, and they began trading blows in the air. The students stood staring in shock. They couldn't even see the two anymore. It was like a fireworks show was going on off. Explosions going off in different directions, and lights flashing about every now and then. Dumbledore had only been able to catch them in his sight every now and then. But they were moving far too fast for him to keep up with. He looked towards young Pan, whose eyes were darting around very quickly, and seemed to be following their every move. He scowled slightly towards the young girl. She had been a direct link he could have used to find the boy, but ever since Severus had told him of her Unusual occlumency shields, an ape of some sort that protected her mind. He had been cautious about entering her mind. His attention was brought back to the fight by a large explosion going off. He turned and saw a body flying down and crashing into the ground. A few minutes later the smoke began to clear and everyone gasped. Harry was still standing, and didn't look worse for wear apart from a few scratches. Across from him stood a very battered-looking Tom Riddle. "Well, that was fun," spoke an out-of-breath Harry. Tom growled, before wincing in pain. Harry began to charge up his ki, a white aura sprung up around him. "Well, Tommy boy, it's been fun. Any last words?" He smirked. Tom's eyes grew wide, before a nasty smile appeared on his face. "How about one last shot, boy?" He lifted his 2 fingers and fired a purple beam. Harry stood smiling calmly. However, it soon changed when the beam flew over his shoulder. He wasn't aiming for him. He turned sharply, and panicked when he saw where it was heading. Pan. Her back was turned, as she was arguing with a red-haired boy. So she never saw it coming. She turned, and her eyes widened at the purple beam heading towards her. The beam connected with her stomach and passed through the flesh as though it were a hot knife through butter. She stood frozen, her hands pressed over her stomach, blood slowly spreading down her front, before she finally fell backwards. Harry stood staring in shock. No, that had not just happened. Pan was not on the ground with a fucking hole in her stomach. It felt like an eternity he stood there. Her body lay unmoving. Oh God, was she dead? Something snapped. He turned towards a smirking Tom Riddle. He let out a roar that echoed throughout the valley. His aura seemed to glow brighter. The ground shook so bad that most of the students fell down. The sky turned blacker than before. Huge bursts of energy crashing all around the grounds. The students could only watch in fear as they watched Harry Potter change. His hair stood in blonde spikes again, but longer, and his muscles seemed to bulge slightly. But the scary thing was the electric blue lightning that crackled around him. Unknown to them, Harry Potter had just reached the level of a Super Saiyan 2. And somebody who cares helped Tom Riddle. Look out. A sweating and slightly cut up Goku stepped out of the training room, Vegeta just behind him. They, with Trunks, Gohan and Goten had turned up to do some training, the girls coming along to meet and chat. "Dad, Gohan keeps cheating," yelled Goten. "The hell I am. You're just letting yourself go, kid," smirked Gohan. "Right boys, keep it down," Chi-Chi called. Dent and Mr. P. Oppo were seated at the table with the girls, talking in hushed tones about something. Gohan opened his mouth to respond before he went pale. "Dad, something's wrong," he whispered. Just as Goku was about to ask what, the ground began to shake. And the sky darkened. "Oh shit," Vegeta murmured. "What?" the girls asked. "Something's happened to Pan," whispered a pale Gohan, "and it looks like it's pissed Harry off," Trunks murmured. "What?" "Harry's nowhere near Hogwarts," Bulma yelled. "Well, he is now. I think we better get going. He's never had a reason to be angry enough to change, and if Pan's involved somehow." "Well, you remember what Den said," Vegeta murmured. "All right, let's go," Goku said. The males all laid their hands on Goku, and they disappeared. Hogwarts. The team just managed to arrive, and could only look around in shock. Hogwarts grounds were a mess, and the whole school were watching a gold-glowing figure. "Well, we found Harry," Trunks murmured. "Wait, where's Pan?" Gohan asked, looking worried. "Why saw some of the teachers surrounding something on the ground, and rushed forward." "Get out the way," Goten yelled as he shoved some old man with a beard out of the way. "Oh damn kid," he whispered in shock. Pan was on the ground, with a large hole in her stomach, and looked pale as hell, but thankfully she was breathing. Gohan rushed forward, and held her in his arms, checking over her, tears in his eyes. Whoever did this to his little girl, he hoped Harry slaughtered the bastard. "Dad, I need a sensu bean, quick." Goku nodded and disappeared. Goten moved over to stand with Trunks and Vegeta, who were watching Harry. "Damn, he looks pissed," he murmured. "Wonder why?" Vegeta snapped angrily. "We should just watch, stay back, trust me." Harry stood glaring at Tom. And Tom knew that if this boy could kill with his looks, he's have been killed ages ago. He gulped as he felt the power rolling off of him. He knew little about Saiyans from his future self, but he knew he was in trouble with a Normal Soup's Saiyan, now. He was facing an ascended Saiyan, and he'd gone and pissed him off in the worst way. He turned and tried to run, only to find his face inches from Harry's. He jumped back and turned to run again, only to find himself face to face with him again, and he could only gulp as he felt his hand wrapped round his neck. Harry glared at Tom with so much hatred, it honestly scared the shit out of him. You, he growled deeply, just made your last mistake. Ever, he roared. Tom could only scream in pain, as Harry ripped off his arm. And screamed louder when he ripped off the other. I'll kill you now, he whispered into his ear, and when the time comes, I will kill your older self. Nobody messes with my friends and gets away with it. He pulled back his fist, and rammed it through the shocked Tom Riddle's chest. He watched as Tom began to twitch horribly before he stopped moving at all. He was dead. He threw the body down, and powered down, and collapsed. The last thing he saw was Vegeta and Trunks rushing towards him before he blacked out. Review me. Oh, and yes, I am cool with some criticism, but don't all out say it sucks and shit, 'cause I am new and yes, it'll hopefully get better. CYA. Aftermath. Updates on weekends 'cause that's when I work poo. But I'll update if I can. Well, unfortunately school starts up again this week. I think I wasn't paying attention, so that may piss off my story writing, but hey, I'll skip school if I have to. Ha ha. Well, here we are, good people. Chapter 8. Aftermath. As soon as he saw the boy collapse, Albus Dumbledore began to move forward, only to pause when he saw two of the strangers that had appeared run up to him. He ground his teeth slightly. He finally had the boy where he could get him, and he would not allow these fools to stop him from getting his weapon. He started forward again, determined to get the boy. As soon as he collapsed, Trunks and Vegeta had rushed forward to Harry. They knew he was tough, but they still had to make sure he was all right. Trunks dropped beside his little brother and began to check on him. After a few seconds he looked up at his dad. He's all right, just had a power burnout I think. I mean, he was pretty angry, he spoke. Vegeta let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, before nodding his head, and he bent down and slapped Harry lightly in the face. He immediately let out a yelp as he got a response off the boy, a smack on the nose. Harry sat up and looked around in slight confusion, before he spotted his dad holding a bloody nose and glaring his could melt steel glare at him. He looked to his left. OC Trunks on his ass laughing like an idiot. Great, he'd done it again. Sorry dad, he laughed sheepishly. Vegeta just grumbled before he helped Harry up. He swayed slightly before he shook his head. You alright bro? Trunks asked. Yeah, I'm cool, he mumbled. So what the fuck happened? You had a fight with someone. That's what's left of him over there, Trunks replied, pointing behind him. He turned to look at the armless body with a huge hole in its chest, and paled slightly as memories flooded back into him. Voldemort. Purple beam. Oh shit. He looked around wildly, before he spoke. TTED, a pale pan being tended to by Gohan. Without a word he rushed towards them and knelt down beside her, taking her hand in his and placing his hand on her forehead. He looked at her stomach and choked back a sob at the bloody hole that was there. He shouldn't have been so cocky, otherwise she wouldn't be injured. Is she all right? He whispered. Yeah kid, she's fine. Gohan murmured. Dad's gone to get a sensu bean for her, she'll be fine. Harry let out a shaky breath, and nodded his head. Gohan stared at the young man in front of him. He smiled slightly, remembering Den's words. Sounds of voices arguing broke Harry from his thoughts. And he looked to see Dumbledore trying to get past Vegeta and Trunks, obviously to try and get to him. He scowled, not in the mood for the old man, but knew he would have to confront him now or else he'd stir up something bad. He murmured a quick, back in a sec, to Gohan before he stood and walked towards the group, which now consisted of his dad, Trunks, Dumbledore, a stern-looking woman and a greasy-haired man. You do not understand. I must speak with Harry Potter now, Dumbledore was arguing. And what would you want with me, Dumbledore? Harry growled, still walking towards the group. He came to a stop beside his dad, with Trunks on his other side. Ah, Harry my boy, thank goodness we've found you at last. We have been very worried, a relieved-looking Dumbledore said. Harry narrowed his eyes slightly at the obvious acting the man was trying to fool him with. Oh, and why would that be? He drawled. Dumbledore frowned slightly. This was not the attitude he expected. Why, it's simple, my boy. You were kidnapped a great many years ago, and we have been very worried about your safety, Dumbledore replied. Kidnapped? I believe you are greatly mistaken, Headmaster. What makes you think I was kidnapped? Harry asked. Mr. Potter, you went missing from your home mere moments after your parents were murdered. We believed you to have been taken by a supporter of you-know-who, the stern-looking witch replied. Harry looked at her and tilted his head slightly. He glanced quickly into her mind and stealthily passed her occlumency shields, and what he found pleased him. The women. McGonagall was genuinely worried for him. He stopped at a particular memory where the headmaster had told her the full version of the prophecy Baba had already told years ago, and knew that she hoped he would defeat Voldemort, and was willing to help him in any way she could. Apparently, she always had a soft spot for his parents when they were students. Actually, I was found by a friend. And adopted, he told her. Dumbledore grew angrier at this. Now he would have to work harder to get the boy under his thumb, and to get him to the Dursleys. Well, my boy, I'm afraid that as a minor you must come to Hogwarts. Voldemort will most likely set his sights on you after revealing yourself. Dumbledore spoke, playing the sad grandfather act perfectly. Too bad Harry knew better. Harry sneered at him. He was truly pathetic. Actually, I believe that the boy can do what he wants. Who do you think you are trying to tell him what to do? Vegeta growled. And who are you to allow the boy what to do? The greasy-haired man sneered. I am his guardian, you piece of trash, and take that tone with me again and I'll rip your spine out from your ass. That's obviously got so effing stuck up it, Vegeta smirked. Snape paled and seemed to inch away from the Saiyan prince. Harry, you should know that I am your magical guardian, therefore you will be attending Hogwarts, Dumbledore spoke up, a twinkle in his eye. Harry burst out laughing at this. Oh my god, he got out between laughs. You think you're my guardian? He burst out into laughs again. Dumbledore got more angry. Who did this boy think he was? Laughing at him. Albus Dumbledore. Harry finally managed to calm down enough to explain. Look, old man, I don't know what made you think you were my magical guardian. But you ain't, he told the shocked Dumbledore. But, what, who? Dumbledore sputtered, his plans to get the boy to Hogwarts now at an all-time low. Harry just smiled at the shocked and angered-looking Dumbledore. However, he interrupted Dumble's sputtering. I will be attending next year. Obviously this school lacks in protection, and I will not allow Pan to be in danger, he spoke seriously. The tea is acceptable, Mr. Potter, McGonagall replied. However, you have missed 2 years of education. She was interrupted. I have been home tutored, and will be able to join my proper year group, he told her. Very well, my boy, Dumbledore replied, eyes twinkling. We will gladly welcome you to Hogwarts. You will be sorted after the first years at next year's sorting. He would easily be able to control the boy if he were nearby. And he knew that he could get the Weasley boy to spy on him when he was sorted in Gryffindor, and maybe get them to meet at platform 9 3/4, and have him tell Potter how evil Slytherin was. Yes, he would make things work in his favor. Is Miss Sun going to be okay, Mr. Potter? McGonagall asked, looking in concern in Pan's direction. What does it matter? The little brat should die. It would make the world such a better. Snape was cut off as a hand wrapped round his throat and lifted him clean off the ground. He stared in fear at the eyes of Potter. He wasn't the only one either. All present looked in shock at the burning crimson eyes he had. If you ever, Harry growled. His voice was more deep and primal, and his teeth were bared in anger. Speak about my mate like that. I will kill you. Got it? He roared. Snape could only nod his head quickly, anything to get him away from the boy. Both Vegeta and Trunks looked at Harry in shock. His Uzaru had gained control of his body. That was a rare event for the boy. They moved forward and pulled him off of the greasy man, and held him until his struggling stopped. He shook his head, before his eyes changed back into their normal emerald green, and his teeth returned to normal. He nodded at McGonagall and glared at the other two, before he turned and headed back towards Pan. Vegeta sneered at the old man before following his son. Trunks, however, left with a parting message. Don't mess with the kid, old man, or he will do something you won't like. he warned. Dumbledore looked shocked. Before turning and ordering the teachers and students to return to the castle, he took one last look at the Potter boy, before heading to his office. Harry leant down to Pan. Goku had just returned with a bag of sensu beans and Pan was already healed and awake. He took the offered bean and popped it into his mouth, and sat down next to Pan. "Hey Harry," she murmured, smiling towards him. "We'll be on our way kids, stay safe," Goku called. Before they grouped together and disappeared thanks to Goku. Harry said nothing but hugged Pan as she leant into him. He could only sigh in thanks, he had almost lost her. "I thought you were dead," he whispered softly. Pan hugged him tighter in response. "Hey, I won't go that easily," she said quietly. "I'm coming with you next year," Harry told her. She turned to look at him. "What? I'm coming to Hogwarts next year, with you," he repeated. "But, what about the old man?" She frowned. "Hey, no worries, I can handle him," he sighed. How long they sat there for, they couldn't tell. They had sat chatting, still holding each other, for most of the night. It was in fact sunrise that they decided to part. Harry walked her up to the castle. "I'm actually kinda glad all this happened. I missed you," Pan smiled. Harry smirked back at her, before hugging her tightly. "I missed you too." He gave her a light kiss on the forehead before he disappeared. Pan stood there, slightly dazed, before a big smile lit up her face and she walked back into Hogwarts. "Review me please. Hogwarts Express. Anyways messages Well, as I have said before, I think Harry and Pan won't get together for a while yet. Maybe for 4th year. Both shall get more powerful. I dunno how, but Pan will go Super 1 and 2. I am making this up as I go along, by the way, so yay hey. Oh yay to Kim Ron Rufus for Eva, I thank you for your offer. But this is my first story and I plan on messing with it on my own. And yes to Makotochi have his friends' enemies sorted out mostly. Well, I think that's all. On with the story. Hogwarts Express. Pan, will you get your ass down here now? Harry yelled up the stairs. Alright. God, don't be such a bitch, Harry, Pan yelled back. Harry let out a snort at that, and wandered back outside, cursing himself for training her too well. This summer had been a blast. As soon as Pan was home from Hogwarts, Gohan had immediately handed her over to him for training, both magical and physical. Unfortunately, with them being together in the time chamber so long, she had become more like him, language and attitude. Harry had spent most of his summer taking care of the magical area of her training, as she needed it with being involved with magic users at Hogwarts. He had taught her stuff that was normally taught in 3rd year at Hogwarts, so classes would not be a problem for her. Especially since McGonagall had sent her a letter offering her the chance to move up a year. Gohan and Vidal had immediately agreed. Before Pan knew what hit her, the letter had already been sent and she was joining the 3rd years. Which meant, she and Harry would be sharing classes. Harry had complained endlessly ever since. Harry himself had gotten a Hogwarts letter, and had already been to Diagon Alley and gotten his things. He had met Ragnarok to find out how his vaults were doing. Apparently Dumbledore had tried to have a law passed that would end up with him back in control of his money. But the goblins stepped forward and threatened a rebellion if such a law was passed. Madame Bones had of course stopped the law herself. Thankfully Fudge had paid attention to her arguments and had dismissed Dumbledore's law and also made it illegal to try and promote such laws. Needless to say, Dumbledore was furious. He had also gone to Ollivander's to keep up appearances for Dumbledore. He wanted the old man to underestimate him, to think him weak, and that would be his downfall. Ollivander had given him the wand that was apparently brother wands with Voldemort's. He snorted at the irony. 2 mortal enemies fighting with the same wand core. But all the same, it was a pretty sweet wand. Hey, are you ready to go yet? Bulma asked him. Yep. Got me trunk, me wand and me music. I'm good, mum, he replied. Just stay safe, okay, sweetie? And keep your eyes on Dumbledore. You remember what Den told us, she warned him. Harry scowled at this, but nodded his head anyway. Well, have a safe year, okay? Don't cause too much trouble, she smirked. Don't smirk like that, mum. You look more like dad every time you do, Harry joked, which earned him a laugh and a smack on the head. What he do this time? Pan questioned as she walked in. dressed in her usual clothes including her bandana. Oh nothing. Just being the little brat he is, Bulma laughed as Harry pouted. You all set dear? Gohan asked as he walked in with Vidal. Yay Dad, it's all done, Pan replied, giving her parents each a hug. As the girls began to talk, Gohan moved towards Harry who was leaning on the wall, wrapping his earphone round his zen and sticking it into his pocket. Harry, I want to ask you something, Gohan whispered. Sure, what you need? Harry replied. Promise me you'll keep her safe, Harry, Gohan spoke seriously. Harry nodded. Of course. You know I'd never let her be harmed if I can help it, he replied. Gohan nodded his thanks, before going back to Pan to say bye. After a few goodbye hugs, Pan held on to RRY and both waved goodbye before they disappeared. They arrived in an alley across the street from King's Cross. Both walked to the barrier between 9 and 10. So we just walk through the wall, Harry murmured sarcastically. Pan nodded her head cheerfully. Yep. The both began to walk towards the wall when a group of red-headed people moved in front of them. Oh just friggin' great, Pan moaned. Friends. Harry grinned. Pan promptly punched him in the arm. The hell, that's the Weasleys. Ginny and the twins are all right. Percy's a stiff and Ron, well you know about him. That I do, Harry growled, his eyes narrowing at the smug-looking red-headed kid. As they approached, he couldn't help but pause when he heard the red-headed women, Mrs. Weasley he guessed, start speaking a bit too loudly. Now what was the platform number again, dears? 9 3/4, she spoke, while looking around expectantly. Ah, he got it now. They must be a Dumbledore-loving family, huh? No doubt Dumbledore wanted them to intercept him. Well, to hell with that. To Pan's confusion, he reached up and pulled out his hairband, and let his hair flow down his back to its full length, and he shifted his head slightly so it hid his scar. All right, let's go. He nodded at Pan, and whispered, later, at seeing her confused look. They both strode past the oblivious Weasleys, and went through the barrier. And Harry got his first view of the Hogwarts Express. Wow, he murmured, smiling as Pan giggled. They both strode forward, Harry making sure his scar wasn't in view, and boarded the train, making sure they got a compartment near the back. Harry took his trunk out and casually lifted it above his shoulders, which would have shocked the hell out of any student who watched, considering how heavy his trunks were, and stuck it on the rack above. He turned round and stifled a laugh at Pan, who glared at him. Poor Pan was shorter than Harry, thus had trouble lifting her trunk onto the rack. Need a hand, he laughed. Pan pouted, before tossing the trunk at him. As he was putting the trunk up, he laughed slightly when he heard Pan growl, "Whore," under her breath. Only on weekends, sweetheart, he winked playfully, causing both him and Pan to start laughing. They sat chatting until they heard the train's whistle blowing, and the train started forward. After a few minutes the door opened and a voice drifted in. Hello Pan, how were your holidays? Harry checked out the girl in the doorway. Bushy brown hair, intelligent brown eyes and slightly larger than normal teeth. This had to be Hermione Granger. It wasn't so bad, he wasn't too rough with me, she laughed, waving a hand in Harry's direction. Hermione looked at who her friend was pointing to, and her breath caught in her throat when she met a beautiful pair of emerald eyes. Hi, she stuttered slightly, before she gave a nervous smile. I'm Hermione Granger, and you are? Harry gave her a smile, hoping to put her at ease. Hey, I'm Right. He didn't want her to know his last name yet. Thankfully, with his hair down, chances are nobody would recognize him from his fight with Tom. Hermione gave him a slightly more confident smile. Oh, so you're the Harry Pan talks about? She questioned, laughing at Pan's indignant, hey. Harry gave a boyish grin. Oh really? Pan dear, I knew you loved me. He joked. Fuck you. She laughed as she threw her book at him. Tut tut Pan, such vile language, surely you can do better. Another voice spoke. Harry looked at the newcomer, another girl. Blue eyes, black hair and smirk galore, this would be Blaise Zabini. Pan's other best friend. Her eyes traveled to him, and her smirk seemed to get wider. So Pan, who's the goth? She smirked. Harry scowled as the other two laughed. Hey, just 'cause I'm wearing a leather coat and an Atreus shirt, and have long hair, don't mean I'm a goth. He mock scowled, before smirking again as they laughed again. Hey, it's cool, I'm the same, Blaze laughed, indicating her own t-shirt. Still remains one. Ooh, good band there, sweetheart. Very good band, Harry said. Both immediately started a discussion, each comparing their bands with each other. Pan and Hermione shook their heads, before settling down and talking themselves. About half an hour later, the door opened and Harry looked up and his expression grew cold at who he saw. Pan, my love, there you are, came Ron Weasley's cry. Pan's left eye twitched. Weasley, how many times do I have to tell you I hate you and to leave me alone, she growled. Ron made a show of pouting. Al thought in Harry's opinion it made him look constipated. Ah, Pan, I know you love me as much I do you, but alas, our love must wait. I'm on a very important mission for the headmaster, he stated pompously, making a pose, still ignorant of Harry's presence. Pan snorted. Doing what? Becoming apprentice to Filch, she mocked. Ron scowled. Nope, I'm gonna befriend the great Harry Potter, and convince him to be in Gryffindor, he finished looking smug. At this, Pan burst out laughing, making everyone bar Harry look at her in confusion. She finally calmed down and pointed at Harry. Well, start convincing him then, she giggled. At this, Hermione, Blaze and Ron turned to him and with his face still a stern mask he flipped his hair slightly, showing off the famous lightning bolt scar. Hermione gasped, Blaze smirked, and Astley looked like he wanted to die right there and then. I think you just failed your mission, dumbass, Harry sneered at the red-haired idiot. Weasley's ears turned bright red, and he looked angrily at him. Shut up, I bet you think you're such a big man, don't you, Potter? He spat. At this, Harry smirked. A bigger man than you could hope to be, he mocked, and in more ways than one. At this, the girls gasped, and began laughing. Weasley grew redder and pulled out his wand and pointed it at Harry. I don't care if you're the boy who lived. I'm Ron Weasley. I helped Professor Dumbledore fight you-know-who, he yelled. Harry merely smirked. What, you consider squealing like a bitch as helping in a fight? Stupefy, Ron screamed. The red spell flew towards Harry, and Weasley let out a triumphant yell as the spell hit Harry in the chest. However, it soon changed when nothing happened. Harry made a mock show of looking down at himself, before smirking at Weasley. OWCH, he said sarcastically. Weasley growled and opened his mouth to say another spell. He was cut off, however, as Harry moved forwards and punched him in the gut, causing him to drop to the ground like a sack of shit. He grabbed the prick's neck and lifted him to his feet before slamming him against the outside wall. I will say this once and only once, Carrot Top, he hissed. Tell the old man I will not play his game, and will not be his puppet, and you. Well, piss me off and I'll kick the shit out of you. He threw him down the length of the corridor, before picking up his wand, snapping it, and throwing it after him. He walked back into the compartment, closing the door and casting some locking and silencing charms on the door before he sat down. You're really Harry Potter? Hermione asked. He nodded his head and Blaze let out a laugh. Wow, you're not exactly what I imagined, but hey, I like you, she laughed. That make me feel so happy, he murmured sarcastically, laughing as she swatted at him. The rest of the journey went smoothly, until the train suddenly put the brakes on, and Pan and Hermione flew onto Blaze and Harry. Harry groaned and looked up and lowered his head, groaning again. Why oh why did Pan have to land on him? Damn hormones. All right, get her asses up, Blaze grumbled. Both girls got up, drawing their wands with them. Harry allowed his senses to open up, and shivered when he felt cold, horribly freezing cold presences nearby. The lights suddenly went out and the train lurched slightly. God damn, Pan, give us light, Harry demanded. Lumos, came Pan's voice, and Harry blinked, adjusting his eyes. Harry, what is it? She whispered, before she shivered slightly. It's so cold. What are you talking about? Hermione demanded. Brains, check this out, Blaze called, pointing at the window. They all watched as it started to ice over, completely covering the whole window. Their breaths suddenly started to mist up as the temperature continued to drop. Stand behind me, now, Harry whispered. Pan, light off, and she did so. They moved without complaint, their wands in hand. The door slid open and a red-haired girl came in. She squeaked when she came face to face with a wand. Ginny, Pan asked. What are you doing here? Quick, come here. She pulled the startled girl behind Harry with them. I was scared. What's happening? Who's he? She asked. He's Harry. Now stay quiet, Pan whispered. The door opened a second time. Except this time, it was no student. It was a creature. It looked like a black cloak floating in the air, but the rotted hand they could see told them otherwise. It kept taking loud rattling breaths, which made it seem as though it were trying to breathe in more than air. It turned its attention towards Harry and floated closer. I do not know why you are here, but I will ask you to leave, Harry spoke to the Dementor. It paused, before Harry heard a voice in his head, which shocked the hell out of him. Young Saiyan, we seek the one known as Sirius Black. Harry's mouth opened and closed, before he finally managed to speak. I do not know of this Sirius Black you speak of, but I assure you he is not here, Harry replied. Then I shall take my leave. The Dementor turned and left the compartment. And after a few minutes, the chill went away and the train started up again. The girls looked at him in shock. Pan spoke up. So it talked with you. Harry frowned. Yay, in my head. Scared the shit out of me, he grumbled. Pan shivered slightly. It was horrible. At first I began to remember. That day, she trailed off. Harry wrapped his arms around her. Hey, it's all right, I'm here, he murmured. Knowing she was referring to his near death. She took a few deep breaths, before smiling. You all okay? Harry asked. The girls looked at him before shaking their heads. They were interrupted when a man in shaggy-looking robes opened their door. Everything all right here? He asked. Fine, sir. They mumbled, Harry's arms still wrapped round Pan. He seemed to look at Harry and he smiled slightly. Ah, you must be Harry Potter. He smiled, holding out a hand, and ignoring Ginny's startled squeak. Yep, that's me. I take it you're a professor. Harry replied, taking the man's offered hand. He smiled. Defense professor. He handed out some chocolate, telling them to eat it, before he walked back off. Well, he seems to know what he's doing, Blaze murmured. Bloody better than that Ponce Lockhart, Pan grumbled. Harry rolled his eyes. Pan had spent a few hours complaining about their defense teacher during the summer. He turned to look at Ginny, who was looking at him like he was her hero or something. Hey, I got something on my face. He joked. She just blushed and looked away. Harry sighed slightly. Great. He sat back and stared out the window. If that was the train ride, what was the school gonna be like? Harry does not yet know about Sirius, and being away from the magical world he never heard about him escaping Azkaban, even during his time at Diagon. Review me please. Sorting. They've started US on our course stuff already. And unfortunately it will definitely mess with my updates. God roll on the summer halls. Grr. Well, moving on from my rambling. To Princess S. Nako. Yes, Harry has shown he is strong physically, but poor Dumbles believes he isn't good at magic. See where I am going. Well, here we go. Harry's sorting. The sorting. Harry yawned as he opened his eyes. Having fell asleep after his encounter with the Dementor, he tried to move to crick his left arm, which was numb for some reason. As he tried to move he found the reason why. Pan was curled up next to him, using his shoulder as a pillow, and was asleep herself. She had a small smile on her lips, arms wrapped possessively around his midriff. Harry couldn't help but smile. While they were young yet, they were slowly growing older. And that meant they could move their relationship forward if she was comfy with it. He knew that Pan did somewhat fancy him. I mean, come on, you can only stare at a guy so often. And he'd caught her usually staring at him lost in thought. He wondered why he felt such a pull towards her. Yes, she was defiantly attractive, both physically and personality-wise. But why was there such a pull between them? His thoughts were interrupted as he heard a throat being cleared. He looked up and saw Hermione shaking Blaze's shoulder. Harry stifled a laugh. She had borrowed his Zen and had fallen asleep with it still playing on random. By the sounds he heard, he guessed it was the remastered Master of Puppets album he had gotten during his holiday. He had found it while looking through the magazines in an HMV shop, and had spotted it in the Kerrang magazine, and being the Metallica fan he had bought it straight away. Harry, we're nearly there. You should change, Hermione murmured. He nodded his head, before sighing. Damn, I was comfy, he thought irritably. He gave Pan a shake, and she gave a moan of protest, cuddling closer to him. He smiled and gave her a harder shake. And she started to wake up, her black eyes staring at him in a daze. What? She yawned, before grumbling to herself. Damn it, I was comfy. Wait, no. I'm meant to be not showing I like him. Ah crap. She got up and stretched, purring in pleasure as her back popped. Harry watched her in amusement. Well, sleeping beauty, we're near Hogwarts and you need to get changed, he smiled, owing as she stuck her tongue out at him. He stood and left, allowing the girls some privacy as they changed into their robes. He himself was still wearing his normal clothes, not exactly wanting to wear the wizard's stupid robes. They were shit to fight in, making it harder to move. So he stuck with his usual trench coat, dark blue baggy jeans and a Treu t-shirt. Much more comfier. His thoughts traveled to what his time at Hogwarts would be like. He wasn't exactly looking forward to it, as Dumbledore would try everything he could to get him to be his puppet. Bah, stupid old man, he'd never know what would hit him. He smirked lightly, at least he could have some fun tormenting him, and Weasley, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. He strolled back to the compartment, where the girls sat in their Hogwarts uniform. He sat back down next to Pan, taking the offered Zen back from Blaise. After the Dementors had come and gone, Harry had finally got to see this, Ginny Weasley, and he had to admit he was a little exasperated with her. It was obvious she had a crush on him, but hopefully she would work her way out of it, and God was her stuttering annoying, she really needed help. Thankfully she had left soon after, and although she thought he hadn't noticed, he'd seen the glares of anger she'd been sending at Pan. How troublesome. Soon enough, the train arrived at the station, and they were all piling off and heading towards some carriages being pulled by some very strange-looking creatures. He sat with Pan, Hermione and Blaise, as they talked about Hogwarts and the classes they had taken this year. Too soon for Harry's liking, they arrived and started to head towards the Great Hall. "Mr. Potter," a voice called. The group turned to see Professor McGonagall walking towards them. She stopped and gave Harry a small smile. "I'm happy you decided to attend." She jumped back to her professional appearance. "Now, the headmaster has asked that you wait until you are called in. You will be sorted after the first years." Harry shrugged and nodded his head, before waving as the girls walked in. He leaned against a wall and pulled out his Zen, turning it on and letting Deathstar's Termination Bliss to play. Nodding his head along with it and murmuring the word to himself, he couldn't wait until he got the chance to get his guitar again. He'd have to find somewhere to play the darn thing. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, the last first year had just been sorted, and Dumbledore stood up. He didn't see the need to sort the Potter boy. After all, he was the son of 2 Gryffindors, so that's where he would no doubt be placed. But Hogwarts herself would not allow it, and so he would have to be sorted. Just in case he had told the hat to place him in Gryffindor, so he was pretty confident. Welcome, to another year at Hogwarts," Dumbledore started, pausing to let the applause to die down. "I know many of you are no doubt famished after your long journey, but I ask that you allow us a few more minutes before we start the feast," smiling at the groans some of the students gave. As most of you will remember, the threat of Voldemort last year was stopped, thanks to a very special young man. This young man has been missing for a very long time, and was believed dead. But Merlin bless us, he has been found, and has agreed to attend Hogwarts, and will be joining his classmates in 3rd year. "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Harry Potter, the boy who lived," he finished, as the hall burst into cheering and applauding. Hagrid opened the door and walked out to fetch the young man. A few minutes later he came back in. But he was alone. "Is there a problem, Hagrid?" Dumbledore called. "Well, see, Professor, he's got summit in his ears, and he can't hear me. Sounds kinda like Muggle. Music he's listenin' to, sir," Hagrid replied. There was a loud thumping noise, and the hall turned to see Pan with her head on the table, having just banged her head off it. She stood up and strode towards the doors. "Don't worry, sir, I'll get him," she called, a somewhat scary smirk on her lips. A few seconds after she left, there was a loud smack sound, followed by a cry of, "Oh, bloody hell, women." A pleased Pan walked back in. Beside her a boy, whom they guessed was Harry Potter. "I don't care if it hurt, you should have been paying attention," Pan snapped at him. "Yay, maybe, but hell, there was no need for that," he replied. rubbing the back of his now sore head. "Well, consider it revenge for walking in on me when I came out of the shower," she retorted, before blushing, realizing what she said. She gave the sniggering Harry another smack on the head, and walked off, still blushing but smiling happily at Harry's yelp of pain. "Well, now that you're here," Dumbledore smiled, although inside annoyed. They appeared to be close. Too close for his plans to work. "Yay, so what do I do?" Harry replied in a neutral tone of voice. "You will have to wear the sorting hat, Mr. Potter, Professor McGonagall replied, "and it shall tell you your correct house." Weird way to sort people if you ask me, Harry thought. He sat down, and McGonagall placed the hat over his head. The last thing he saw was the hall of students craning their necks to get a better look at him. He waited, and waited. "Yay, is this thing broke or what?" he wondered. "Broken, young man. I'll have you know I'm almost as good as I was when I was created," a voice said in his head. Harry let out a yelp. "Holy Mother of Jesus, what the fuck are you?" he asked, not realizing he had said it out loud, obviously not seeing the looks of shock on the students' faces. Or the face of Pan, Hermione and Blaise as they tried not to laugh. He knew this thing was magical, but come on, how was he to know it talked to him? "Well, you are defiantly not what was expected, Mr. Potter," the hat replied, amusement in its voice. "Yay, well, I love to be different," he replied. You do realize that the headmaster has told me to sort you into Gryffindor, do you not?" "Ah, but I see other qualities in you, yes. You are extremely loyal to your friends. Helga would be proud to have you in her house. You are indeed well taught. I see your knowledge is large and you thirst for more." "Yes, defiantly Ravenclaw, and Salazar would love you to be in his house. Your cunning and ambition are incredible." Harry sat patiently as the hat explored through his mind. His own Uzaru, unlike Pan's, knew the intention of anything that was in his mind, thanks to his training in legilimency, so it knew not to attack the sorting hat as it searched. The hat seemed to sigh before speaking. "Mr. Potter, I am at a loss of what to do with you. You would do well in either of the houses of Hogwarts, so tell me, which house would you prefer?" Harry's thoughts drifted to Pan. His feelings for her, his promise to Gohan. He could protect her better if he was in the same house. Maybe that's where he should go. "Very well, Mr. Potter. I see your loyalty to help your friend." The hat, if it could, would no doubt be smirking at him. "Yes, I believe that you should join the same house with her, and a word of advice. Not all is as it seems, and you would be wise to keep young Pan close. You will understand why in the future." Before Harry had a chance to reply to that, the hat yelled, "Ravenclaw." He removed the hat, to see the Ravenclaw table clapping wildly. He stood and laid the hat back on its stool. And before he left to the table, glanced at Dumbledore. He looked furious, and was glaring hard at both him and the sorting hat. Harry smirked to himself, before sitting himself next to Pan, as she gave him a hug. Yes, maybe this school could be fun. First day part 1. Anyways, enough of my ranting, as fun as I find it, lol. Well, now he's at Hogwarts, my mind's kind of gone blank. What to do? Well, I'll try some stuff and we'll see how I go. Enjoy. First day part 1. The next morning Harry woke up and stretched, grunting as many of his joint cracked. He let out a loud yawn and stumbled off to the shower. His sorting last night had left many in shock. He was supposed to be a goody-goody Gryffindor, not some geeky Ravenclaw. He just ignored them and gave the gaping street Udence a very friendly hand sign where his middle finger was involved. He had sat with Pan, who had hugged him. He could almost feel the relief that was rolling off of her. The night passed without much else of interest. Pan had pointed out all of the teachers to him, and most seemed like some nice people. Most, not including one Severus Snape, first-class bastard. The fool was trying to act smug by glaring at the students. Until he turned his eyes on Harry. He had scowled even more, making Harry merely raise his eyebrow at the guy. For fun, he smirked at him and held up his hand, his index and middle finger joined together, and made a small ball of key. Snape had immediately paled, no doubt remembering what had happened to the last guy who pissed him off. Dumbledore was looking as normal as ever, smiling with twinkling eyes and talking with Professor McGonagall, but Harry could see the spark of anger in those twinkly eyes. He was obviously not happy about the sorting hat's decision. Wit. Another smaller yawn. Harry walked out of the shower. For some weird reason the teachers had given him his own private rooms, just by the Gryffindor dormitories apparently. He guessed it was because they were worried he'd rip up some idiot that angered him like Riddle had, and had decided to place him there. He had decided he still wasn't going to wear the stupid robes. If they didn't like it then they could kiss ass for all he cared. He wore his HIMT shirt, the one with the heartogram on the front and back, and his usual dark blue jeans. He decided to leave his coat off for today, as it was pretty warm. So he wore his zip-up Avenged Sevenfold hoodie. He easily found his way to the hall, blessing his semi-photographic memory. He had looked at the map in Hogwarts A History, so he had a pretty good idea where to go and how to get there. Walking in he noticed Pan, Blaise and Hermione were already there, sitting at the Ravenclaw table. He walked over to them and smiled, sitting himself next to Pan. No surprise there. "Morning, Harry," Hermione said, laughing at the grunt Harry gave in response. His head was currently on his arms, using them as a pillow. "Not a morning person, I see." Blaise laughed. Harry gave a positive grunt in response. "Aw, come on, Harry. The sooner you're up the sooner you get through the day," Pan laughed. "Nah, later you sleep, less time awake," Harry mumbled in return, filling an empty glass. This off course set the girls off again. Harry sat up and looked at the glass of something. "The hell's this?" he asked. "Pumpkin juice," Blaise answered. Harry growled. He hated pumpkins. And they had bloody pumpkin juice. That was just sickening. He held out his wand, and one silent summon later, there was a can of ice-cold Fanta orange in front of him. He grinned happily and grabbed the can. Pan scowled at him. "Wish I'd though of that," she grumbled. Harry laughed, the sleep leaving him and his energetic personality coming back. "Hey, no worries, I got a cool R full of different cans of juice in the trunk. It's also got an ever-replenishing spell on it, so we're all set," he explained. Pan smiled at that. Although pumpkin juice was all right, she missed her Coke and other favorite fizzy drinks. Professor Flitwick walked by them, handing them their timetables. Hermione frowned as she spotted Pan's timetable. "Pan, I think there's been a mistake. It says you're in third year," she said, pointing. Pan smacked her head, and Harry laughed. "You forget to tell them." He laughed. "Yay, my bad." Pan giggled slightly, before turning back to Hermione. "My exam results went so well. I got put into third year," she explained. Hermione let out a squeal before practically mauling her friend with questions. Harry and Blaise could only laugh at the look on Pan's face. She looked shocked and slightly scared at her friend's rambling. Merlin, did this girl's breathe? "Well, first we have double transfiguration, then we have double comc, then double dada," Blaise murmured, comparing her schedule with Harry. "What joy!" Harry spoke. Hermione, Blaise, Pan and Harry sat at the very back of the classroom. Both Harry and Pan were listening to Harry's music, headphones dangling between them. Since they already knew all this, they had no worries. As Professor McGonagall set the class their practical task, she looked at Harry Potter. Although slightly upset he wasn't a Gryffindor, she was happy he was at Hogwarts. She pursed her lips when she noticed both Harry and Pan nodding their heads. She had also spotted the headphones they had between them. Although a witch, she did know most of the things in the Muggle world. She marched over to them, and almost smiled as they took the headphone out as she approached. "Mr. Potter, Miss Sun, why have you not started on the work I have set?" Both looked at each other a little sheepishly. "Sorry, Professor. What was it we had to do?" Pan asked. McGonagall pursed her lips. "We are turning your animals into an inanimate object of your own choice, Miss Sun," she spoke. Pan nodded and pointed her wand at the snail in front of her, before she waved her wand and mumbled something under her breath. The animal turned into a blood-red V-arrow-shaped guitar. McGonagall's jaw dropped, as did everyone else's who had all been watching. Harry let out a pleased hum before picking up the guitar and plucking each string. "Well, it's tuned. That's good," he laughed. His fingers began to fly as he played Avenged Sevenfolds, Unholy Confessions. He only played, he didn't sing. He was still working on that. Everyone could only watch in shock at the speed and precision Harry played with. As he finished, he looked up at the shocked faces. "What, you're acting like you never saw a guy play guitar before," he laughed. 30 points each to Ravenclaw. That Was most impressive transfiguration I've seen from a third year. Professor McGonagall spoke. She was actually smiling at them. Both Harry and Pan smiled at each other, and Harry took a mock bow as the students began to clap. As things settled down, Blaise leaned over to talk with Harry. I didn't know you played guitar, she whispered. Not many do. I plan on setting up a band when I'm older, he whispered back. She grinned at him and whispered, did you know I play drums? She gave a wink at the laughing Harry. You're in, he told her. Come see the real one. Hey there people, sorry for the crappy update speed. I know it's frustrating but I have been pretty busy, and I am suffering from writer's block, and I hate it. I want to write, I really do, but I can't seem to get anything onto paper, or this case computer lol. Roheen, thank you. I have been looking for ages for her damn name, and I only found Bulla somewhere on a DBZ site. Jabarber69ERRM, yay, that's not disturbing, lol, no worries my friend. I refuse to let a story become abandoned. Well, here you go, what you have all been waiting for. An update. COMC. The group of four walked outside towards Hagrid's hut for their first lesson on Care of Magical Creatures, first for Blaise and Hermione. Anyways, Harry, Blaise and Pan were still discussing their newly formed band, which they decided to have Harry and Pan on guitar, and Blaise on the drums. Blaise had told that she liked to play some of Trivium's songs for fun, her favorite being The Deceived, because of the speed of her double bass pedaling. So all we may need now are a guitarist and bassist, yay? Pan asked. Harry nodded. Yay, I have an idea of who can be the guitarist. He's a dude I know, you'd like him, but for the bass, well, I dunno yet. I just want to have a get-together, Hope Blaise. I get bored playing on my own, but playing with a band will be great. Hermione let out a huff of annoyance, seeing as she didn't listen to the music the others did, she was feeling slightly left out. Sorry my own, Harry laughed, it's just we are pretty damn excited about this. You aren't really being serious about this, are you? Hermione asked, her voice veiled with barely noticeable disgust. The others looked at her as though she were crazy, Harry the most, as he'd heard the hint of disgust. Yes, it's what I want to be when I'm older, I've dreamed of it for years, Harry replied forcefully. Yay, I'm the same, said Blaise, I always dreamed about doing it, but I never knew anyone else who played music. Hermione sighed. You do know that the magical world won't agree with you doing this, I mean, you're the boy who lived. They'll protest against you becoming a muggle rock star. Harry scowled at that. The wizarding world can go fuck themselves, they ain't gonna stop me from doing what I want. Hermione replied hastily, I know, but just saying they will cause you problems. They finally arrived at Hagrid's hut, where Hagrid stood looking slightly nervous. Hi Hagrid, the group said. Hagrid turned and a smile appeared underneath his shaggy beard. Pan smiled up at the giant man. It was great, we shocked. McGonagall in Transfiguration. The group laughed, remembering the stern teacher's face when they did their spells. And especially when Harry played the guitar. They all talked with Hagrid while the rest of the class made their way towards them. When they were finally all there, Hagrid gathered them round and led them towards the dark forest. Harry and Pan, instead of walking and tripping around like the rest of their classmates, levitated themselves a little off the ground and followed Hagrid. They were thankfully not too high up, so it wasn't spotted by their other classmates. Pan felt slightly nervous, she had never shown any sort of hint towards her talents, not wanting any of the hassle or the problems it would cause, but now, with Harry being there, she felt safe, because Harry was not someone to be messed with, and he would no doubt wreck any idiot who dared to try anything. Hagrid finally stopped at a clearing, and turned to address the class. Now just wait here a little bit, and I'll go get what you'll be studying today, he said, before turning and walking off. Harry and Pan set themselves down next to Blaise and Hermione, and merely raised an eyebrow to the staring students. Well well, so you're the famous Harry Potter, came a drawling voice. Wyatt turned and came face to face with a blonde-haired boy, whose hair was almost perfectly combed and styled, although with all the gel it made him look even kind of slimy. Harry merely raised an eyebrow. That would be me, he replied stonily. The boy scowled slightly. I don't think you know who I am. I am Draco Malfoy, heir of the Malfoy family. Harry's eyebrow rose slightly, showing he had heard the boy. Something you should know, Potter, are that some wizarding families are better than others. He scowled towards his friends. You don't want to make the mistake of befriending the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out a hand. Harry gave a glance at Pan which plainly stated, is this kid for real? I believe, Mr. Malfoy, that I am perfectly capable of telling that for myself, although I thank you for your concern, he drawled, his Slytherin side shining through. Malfoy turned slightly pink in anger. You will regret this, Potter. Know that it is not wise to make me your enemy, he hissed. Harry merely raised an eyebrow. I believe, Mr. Malfoy, that you should not go making enemies on small things such as this. As a Slytherin, you should know this, and you may end up very alone and with no allies. Malfoy actually gave him an almost approving nod. Taking a deep breath, he replied, You are correct, I apologize. He spoke neutrally, before he turned and walked away. He glanced at Pan, who shrugged at him. Before her eyes narrowed at something behind him, well, he could guess only one reason why. So, Potter, messing with slimy snakes already, you traitor, came Weasley's voice. Yep. Har. Rye turned again and smirked at the stupid boy. What do you want, Weasley? I've already kicked your ass. You just obviously ain't getting the message, are you? Weasley turned red in anger, but was interrupted by the return of Hagrid. Ta-da! Hagrid boomed, quickly catching everyone's attention. Everyone stared at the creature, Hermione muttering, he brought a hippogriff. And the rest, ooh-ing, and aw-ing, at the half-horse half-eagle. Now this here's Buckbeak, he's a hippogriff, he continued on, explaining the history of hippogriffs and their habits. Now the one thing you must always remember, he stated seriously, is that hippogriffs are very proud creatures, and to insult them is a death sentence. His beetle-black eyes roamed the crowd of students, who all knew that if Hagrid acted like this, then it would be stupid to ignore his warning. Now then, who'd like to come say hello? Hagrid asked. The crowd instantly moved aside, except for Harry and Pan, who were bouncing on the balls off their feet, hands in the air and childishly pushing each other, trying to get picked first. Hagrid beamed at them. He had expected nobody to be brave enough, but these two were something special. All right, Harry, you can go first since you're new, he said. He chuckled as he stuck his tongue out at Pan, who gave him the finger. Harry approached the hippogriff and stopped, staring intensely into Buckbeak's orange eyes. Just as Hagrid opened his mouth to tell him what to do, Harry bowed down, before straightening back up with an almost cat-like grace. Buckbeak stared at the boy before standing up and circled him, closing into Harry, who merely stood still, not moving. The creature stood directly in front of the boy, its head mere inches away from his own, both still holding eye contact. As Hagrid was about to interrupt, Buckbeak bent his front legs, going into an unmistakable bow. Harry let out a small laugh and stroked the creature. Well done, Harry, Hagrid boomed, clapping his large hands. The class following, he may just let you ride him now, he said, picking up a shocked Harry and sticking him on Buckbeak's back, and the creature took off before the words, what, came out of his mouth. Holy Christ, he yelled, causing Pan to laugh as she heard. Hagrid himself just had a sly-looking grin hidden under his beard. A few minutes later, Buckbeak and a thoroughly windswept Harry landed. Harry sat still before he toppled sideways onto the ground. Buckbeak leaned down and yanked Harry back to his feet by the neck of his hoodie. Bloody no good overgrown budgie thing, Harry continued, to mumble things about the hippogriff on his way back towards the class. Have fun? Pan asked, face almost split with her wide grin. Harry's eyes drilled a hole in her head. Next time, you can go first, he muttered. The girls all laughed at his statement. Well done there, Harry. See you read your book. Good, take 30 points to Ravenclaw, he stumbled, causing Harry to raise his eyebrow. Was Dumbledore really that confident he'd be his golden boy? So, what, famous Potter can ride an animal? Any moron could, came Weasley's snide voice. He swaggered up to Buckbeak, and Harry could see him glancing at Pan. So he was trying to impress her. Ha, what a retard. Yeah, I bet you're a stupid flea bag, ain't you, he sneered. He was cut off as Buckbeak reared up and slashed at him, his talons cutting deep into the moron's arm. He let out a high girly shriek and fell to the ground, blood flowing from his arm. Buckbeak let out a screech and went in for what no doubt would have killed him, had Harry not suddenly appeared. He held out his arm and many people shrieked as the claws came into contact with his arm. But they soon gaped in shock as it nearly stopped, blocked by his arm and no damage being visible. Buckbeak began to pace agitatedly in front of Harry, who continued to stare at him. "That is enough, Buckbeak," he spoke. "The fool has been punished, stand down." The hippogriff glared at him for a long moment. Before it finally calmed down, Harry turned to see Hagrid carrying Weasley off, no doubt to the infirmary. The class gathered their bags and left, Harry and the group trailing behind to talk. "I can't believe he was so stupid," Hermione was saying. "He deserved it. Did you see the way he was looking at me, like I was meant to be impressed?" "What a loser," Pan spat. "No worries, dear. He'll learn eventually," Harry soothed her. He paused suddenly, something just hitting home with him. "Girls, go on ahead. I need a minute alone." The girls looked at him in confusion, and Harry mouthed, "King Kai," to her. And she immediately dragged the girls off with her. Harry paused, before he closed his eyes and concentrated. "King Kai, you there? Ah, Harry, there you are. I was wondering when you would notice." Harry had a feeling that he was smirking. "Yay question, how does no one act all freaked out around me? Especially after what happened with Riddle," Harry thought. King Kai laughed, "Because my boy, I had Den wipe their minds right after the event, as he always does after an event where people see your powers. However, some of the faculty still know because of their occlumency shields." "So who knows?" he asked. "Snape, Dumbledore, Flitwick and McGonagall," he replied. "Aw, thanks, I'll talk later. Bye." Harry sped his pace up, now pretty damn happy, and he had defense next, which he loved. Oh yay, he was having a damn good day so far. He pulled out his Zen and stuck it on random, humming when In Flames' Dead End came on. Oh, he had to do that song with Pan. Dada and the Saiyan. I have to say I'm pretty shocked. This story has got a lot of positive feedback from you all, so I'm making it my main priority to get a few chapters up. May take a while because I'm typing slowly, so I hopefully don't make too many stupid misspells and shit, lol, be happy you lot. I've switched off my MSN for this. Grumbles. Ah well, here you go. Chapter. Wait, what number is this? Dada and the Saiyan. Harry hummed as he walked up to the Dada classroom. He had just checked to see some new songs were on his MP3 player and he was currently listening to some of them. While scrolling through them he paused and stared excitedly at one song. Fuck yay, Trivium's bringing out a new album. Oh my god, alright. Harry thought happily, as he quickly put on Detonation, which Trivium had released as a single. By the time he walked into the Dada room his eyes were sparkling. The song was different to their usual music but he wasn't complaining, it sounded sweet. "Harry, what's up?" Pan asked, noticing the grin on her friend's face. Harry in answer handed his MP3 player over to them. Both looked at the screen and gave little squeaks, before both had a headphone in their ears, listening to the new song from their all-time favorite band. "Dude," Blaze said, quickly mirroring Harry's previous state. Pan nodded her head. "Oh, we are so gonna play this," she smirked, nodding her head lightly along with the song. Harry nodded, and took back the MP3 player as Professor Lupin walked in. His robes were still as shaggy as ever. While he looked wearied and tired, he still had a warm smile on his face. "Good morning, class," he spoke in a slightly hoarse way. "Would you please put your things away? And follow me, please." As they were following Professor Lupin, they came across Peeves, who was attempting to stick some chewing gum in the keyhole of a door. "Now Peeves, I don't think Mr. Filch will be happy if you block that," Professor Lupin stated. Peeves merely blew a loud wet raspberry at him, and began to call him Loony Loopy Lupin. Lupin merely raised an eyebrow at the ghost, before he reached for his wand. Then Harry interrupted. "Allow me, sir," he said smoothly as Peeves noticed him. "Why, it's Potty Wee Potter. What does he want with old Peevesy?" The poltergeist cackled. Harry merely smiled pleasantly and pulled a large bag of dung bombs out of his hoodie pocket, before silently handing them over to him. Peeves looked at the bag before grinning nastily and bowing to him. "Now Potty be talking my language, squeeze me whilst I find old Filchy Poo," he cackled and took off down the corridor. "Well, Mr. Potter, I would never have thought of that," came Lupin's voice, "but was that really a good idea?" His eyes sparkled in amusement. Harry shrugged. "Meh, before stepping back to the girls, who were whispering furiously at Finnegan, Thomas and Weasel, who had their backs turned on him. Quote. Nothing, I'm so much better for you, Weasley's voice reached his ears. Fuck off, Weasel, I can't fucking stand you. Why can't you get it through your thick skull? Pan hissed. He opened his mouth to reply, but froze and turned pale as a shadow loomed over him. He turned quickly to see Harry growling at him. His teeth pulled back in a snarl, and his face inches from his own. Weasley squeaked and scrambled away from the group, the other two boys following him. Harry smirked and the class began walking again. Finally they reached what was apparently the staff room. Inside was none other than Severus Snape. He scowled as the class filed in and got up to leave. "Oh, don't mind us, Professor Snape," came Lupin's voice, "by all means stay." Snape sneered and muttered something into the professor's ear, who nodded and murmured something back. Snape then stalked out the room, his cloak billowing out behind him. Lupin turned to them and told them that they were going to be going against a creature, a boggart, and they would face it one at a time on their own. Harry watched as it was Weasley's go. He had walked in and the boggart had changed into a giant spider. Weasley had promptly screamed and fainted, the class laughing as he was magically dragged out by Professor Lupin, who shook his head and scribbled an obvious 0 on the clipboard he was holding. Then it was Pan's go. Harry looked at his best friend go in with a confident smile. She could easily handle this. He suddenly tensed as he felt something enter the room. Looking around he frowned as he saw nothing. He looked for magic but there was nothing there. How weird. He turned back to watch Pan. Albus Dumbledore smiled for the first time in weeks. He had just made his first move at getting control back over his weapon. He had entered in time to see young Pan heading to face the boggart, and had put an old curse on her that would trap her in an illusion of her worst fear, but to her the illusion would be real, and that meant any injuries she sustained, they would affect her physically. They wouldn't be able to help her no matter what anyone did. They would not be able to help her. She would no doubt be killed or get put into St. Mungo's long-term ward. Then he could try and catch a grief-stricken RRY and cast a mind-altering spell on him. He had also thankfully put a spell on her mind that would make whoever approached her seem like her worst fear. So even if Lupin somehow knew what had happened, he would not be able to approach. While he was sorry he had to do this to the young bright girl, it was for the greater good. He walked back to his office, his eyes twinkling again. Yes, it was for the greater good. Pan walked into the newly made room, in which stood the rattling closet. Suddenly there was a strange fog in front of her. She blinked her eyes rapidly and the fog disappeared. She looked around in confusion. The room looked nothing like what it had a minute ago. It looked strangely like Tuffle Planet. Before she had a chance to consider what had happened, she caught sight of something that made her freeze in her tracks. Her eyes widened in pure terror and she took a horrified step backwards. In front of her stood a face she had never wanted to see ever again, with black and gold clothing. Long white hair that stood up on end, strange red lines on his face and merciless steel-gray eyes. Baby, or in this case, Baby when he had possessed Vegeta. She stood shaking in absolute terror. She knew she was no match for him, and could remember all too clearly the power he held. She whimpered as he slowly raised his gold-gloved hand and held it in front of him, a large ball of purple ki forming in his hand. He gave out his mechanical-sounding laugh and fired it at her. Pan held her hands up in a desperate attempt at stopping the ball of energy, her eyes shut tight in fear. Shish. He opened them when she never felt horrible pain she was awaiting, and her eyes widened as she saw who had rescued her. A younger-looking Harry Potter stood in front of her, his left arm outstretched holding the ball of purple energy. And his cold green eyes focused on Baby. Pan idly thought he looked exactly like his uncle in that stance. His neck-length silky hair was swirling in the wind, his aura was surrounding him, ruffling his torn clothes, his eyes never straying from Baby's as he absorbed the ki. He lowered his arm slowly, and without taking his eyes off his enemy spoke the words Pan remembered all so well. Pan, get out of here, now, find Uncle Goku, I will keep him occupied, he stated clearly, making sure she heard every word correctly. Pan by now had tears of fear running down her face, as she heard herself reply. Harry, no, I can't leave you, she cried. Harry turned to look at her. and unlike before she could see the love in his eyes, which she would not have recognized when she was younger. "Go," he whispered. "I will keep you safe, Pan. No matter what may happen to me, I have always been there for you, and always will," he said, his eyes staring deeply into hers. Pan was still crying, but refused to move. It was like her legs would not allow her to. Harry turned his head back to Baby, both seemingly ignoring her presence. Baby's hysterical laughter rang around her as he stood staring at Harry. "So boy," came his voice, which sounded like there was two talking as one, with a slight mechanical quality to it. "You think you can beat me?" Harry's aura suddenly flashed, changing to a raging swirling gold. And his hair leapt up, now golden spikes, his eyes faded to a turquoise blue and he fell back into his fighting stance. "I know I can't," he spoke solemnly, "but I will not let you hurt Pan." Baby laughed and suddenly charged forward, gaining the first blow as he hit a surprised Harry. Harry quickly dodged the next blow and the fight got more brutal, Baby obviously playing with Harry. And Pan went rigid as the moment that haunted her the most played out in front of her. Harry slammed into the ground to her left, struggling to sit up, his breaths coming in sharp gasps, his clothes torn, his body bruised, cut, and burned. Blood was flowing from his midsection from where Baby had through a key wave that sliced his stomach. Baby landed and laughed while staring at Harry's barely moving body. He gave a sneer and spoke again. "You weak fool, can't you see how much power I wield? I am invincible." He laughed again. Pan's eyes widened as he suddenly turned his attention to her. "Now watch as I kill your precious friend," he cackled. He threw another large ball purple key at her, which was bigger and was moving a lot faster than before. Pan screamed and held her hands out, her eyes widening in horror at what next happened. Harry had suddenly appeared in front of her, his body facing hers, his eyes staring at her, a silent plea in his eyes for her to get away. Then, he screamed as the energy ball hit him in the back, Pan's eyes wide in horror as she watched the life fade from his eyes. His appearance soon shifted to normal, his Super Saiyan traits fading. His hair lowered back into its normal silky black, his eyes fading to the emerald color she loved. Harry stood in front of her smoking, his body seemed to fall in slow motion, his eyes hauntingly staring ahead as he fell to his knees. Then slowly onto his chest. He remained unmoving. Pan stood staring in horror. No, this wasn't right. He had lived before, he had not died. The unmoving body in front of her told her otherwise. Pans began to sob in pure pain as she dropped onto her knees. She held a shaking hand over Harry's body, unable to touch him. Pan's eyes flashed, and her aura sprang up, gold licking at her like fire. She gave a deep primal-sounding growl of fury and stood up. As her eyes locked onto Baby's, she let out a loud roaring yell, her anger seeping off her in waves. Her hair spiked up and changed into gold, her black eyes switching to turquoise blue, and her muscle bulged slightly. Pan was too angry to care that she had just, for the first time ever, changed into a Super Saiyan. Harry and the Dada class stood watching as Pan's turn at the boggart became a much more dangerous and terrifying thing. They had watched as some white-haired freaky person had came out, but to their shock, Pan did nothing, in fact. Her eyes were wide and glassy, although her arms twitched at odd intervals. Harry, the forced to notice something was wrong, stood forward, the boggart seized its shonk. Ian changed into a huge dragonoid creature, with white skin and 7 blue dots on its chest. It had long white horns, and black spikes coming out of its back and elbows. Its eyes roamed round the room before they landed on frozen Harry. Its face twisted into a smirk. "So boy, back for round 2 are we?" came the dual mechanic voice of the demonic creature. Harry shook his head before his wand snapped up, and in a large bang. Then a shriek of pain, the boggart disappeared. Harry strode in front of Pan and held her head between his hands, his eyes glancing into hers and his lips murmuring unknown words. His eyes widened when slowly a white aura began to creo around her, before soon it was flickering like a flame over her whole body. Harry glanced down and froze when he saw her fists clench, and her hair began flashing gold. Her aura began flickering more wildly and also flashed gold. Harry cursed, and to the shock of the students and Lupin, placed 2 fingers on his forehead. Both he and Pan disappeared with a whoosh sound. Harry landed them into the snow-covered wasteland that was Antarctica. His eyes snapped to Pan's, as he pulled out his staff and aimed the top at her head. To his shock, he discovered the mental illusion she was under, and was about to remove it when he suddenly flew back, Pan's scream of fury and anger ringing in his ears as he flew back from the explosion of power that came from her. He sat up with a groan, silently cursing Snow for being so soft. He glanced at Pan and froze. She was standing there, surrounded by the trademark golden aura of a Super Saiyan. Silently he thought she looked hot in her Super Saiyan form, but that soon ended when her eyes suddenly snapped to him. Harry gulped slightly as Pan settled herself into her fighting position. He wouldn't be able to get the spell of her quickly enough now she was about to attack. He slowly pulled out his necklace, which was a model of Shenron. He pressed his thumb to it and murmured into it, "Z-Team, backup needed, code red." At the house of Chi-Chi and Goku, most of the Z-Team sat outside in the sun. Goku and Vegeta were arguing about something, and Trunks, Goten, Bra thank you for her name, Tien, Shiatsu, Yamcha. Krillin and Oob were laying on the grass chatting about something. Gohan and Vidal, Chi-Chi, Android 18 and Master Roshi were sitting at the table talking about something over drinks. Gohan had just taken a sip of his cool drink and spat it back out as he felt the necklace Harry had given him grow cold. The rest of the Z-Team tensed up as they too felt their own grow cold. They all took their own out and paled as they saw it was glowing a blood-red color. Goku and Vegeta ran over, the others following. "You know what this means," Master Roshi said crisply. "The boy needs help, no dallying, get to him now." Without saying a word everyone pulled on their fighting clothes, and grabbed onto Goku as he focused on Harry's aura. The women looked at each other, each hoping everything was all right. Piccolo broke out of his meditation when he felt the necklace around his neck turn cold. He scowled and pulled it out, his face darkening as he saw the red glow. He stood abruptly and stormed outside, meeting Dend and Mr. Popo outside. "What's happening?" he demanded. Dend turned angry eyes towards him, and even Piccolo was worried. Dend rarely got angry, something bad was happening. "Dumbledore's put a spell on Pan. Harry won't be able to break it with his full concentration on fighting Pan, especially since he won't be willing to harm her." "I'm coming down," he stated grimly. Piccolo looked at him. "But you haven't been down in years, are you sure?" Dend nodded. "I will be there as soon as I can. Harry will be fighting, do not interrupt unless he desperately needs help." He turned and walked back to the lookout. Piccolo jumped off the edge and flew himself towards Scotland. Dumbledore glared at the wall across from him. Lupin had just came to tell him the boy had used some sort of apparition to transport both himself and the girl out of Hogwarts. He had also mentioned the aura the girl had, so she too was trained in the ways of martial arts. If this played out, he could use that to his advantage. He paused and gulped silently, assuming he wouldn't be killed for this. Harry dropped himself into a defensive position. He knew talking would not snap her out of it, he only hoped he didn't hurt her. Suddenly Pan disappeared and he panicked. He was smacked in the back of the head and flew into a wall of diamond-hard ice. He hissed in pain at the impact. Before he turned and yelped when he saw a Kamehameha flying towards him. With a huge bang the whole wall of ice and Harry disappeared under the ice. Pan suddenly shot under the water after him. Harry managed to stabilize himself in the water, shivering at the absolutely freezing temperature. He quickly turned to face Pan, only to duck as she threw a fist at him. He let out a vicious uppercut and caught her on the chin. But as she flipped she kicked him in the chin, sending him flying up and crashing through another layer of ice and back into the frigid winter air. She reappeared in front of him, and hit him in the chest, sending him into the ice. Thankfully he didn't go through again. Harry stood up and spat out a mouthful of snow and blood. He looked up at the gold blur that was rapidly approaching him. He growled and let out a yell, his own golden aura springing up as he charged into Super Saiyan. Pan was thrown back from the wave of his power-up. Harry quickly teleported behind her and grabbed her leg, throwing her towards the ground. He groaned as she flipped and landed on her feet, kicking off and back up to him, the ice behind her exploding. He blocked her blow and began to dodge and block the rapid punches and kicks she sent at him. The Z-Team arrived and looked up, their jaws dropping as they realized exactly who was fighting. "What the hell?" Trunks yelled over the roar of the blizzard. "Why the hell is she Super Saiyan? I thought she wasn't Saiyan enough. Goten yelled at his dad. Gohan had electrical bolts twittering about him, as his angry eyes stared at Harry fighting his daughter. He knew something was wrong, but knew not to get involved. He trusted Harry. He turned to Goku when he heard his brother's question. "Yay, that's what I thought too," Goku yelled, his ND covering his face from the heavy winds. "Obviously we were wrong." Harry and Pan's fists were flying furiously. They were perfectly matched, but Harry had more advantages due to his experience. He had been contacted by Dend, who had said he was coming in to distract her as long as he could. Sure, like that wasn't hard. He landed on the ground with a crash and turned to look for her. He froze when she suddenly appeared before him and let loose a vicious kick. He held his hands up to protect his face, only to pale horribly. His face took a look of pure horror. She wasn't aiming for his face. Crunch. She was aiming for his balls. Harry dropped to his knees, tears leaking out his eyes as he held onto his damaged man goods. His eyes wide and his mouth forming a perfect O-shaper. She was evil. Good Kami, Jesus. Allah and God, she was evil. Every male that had watched the blow land all winced and moaned, pitying Harry. She suddenly grabbed his neck and threw him in the air, causing him to yelp in surprise. She flew behind him and smashed him back down to the ground. He crumpled to a halt and moaned in pain. He opened his eyes to see a pair of white robes in front of him. Looking up, he stared into a long-awaited guardian's eyes. "Hello, Harry," Dend said, leaning against his staff, a smile on his face. "Having fun?" Harry merely moaned. "I never knew evil, until I met you." "No, to those who are asking. Dumbledore shall not be killed. Come on, there's only so many times I can beat up Ron on his own, but Dend will be laying into him grins. As to the ball shot, it just came to me. I thought it would be a funny thing to do, although as I and many other males shall say, OWCH. Lol. Ah well, not much else to say. Here you go, laddies and ladies. I never knew you were so evil." Harry looked up to the twinkling eyes of Dend, who had a smile on his face as he took in Harry's worn, beaten and slightly hunched form. "Having a rough time, I see?" Dend asked in amusement. "Shut up," Harry groaned, his hands gripping his damaged goods, causing Dend's smile to twitch slightly. Dend opened his mouth to retort, when he looked up suddenly and swore. He disappeared and left Harry to look up and pale at the large ball of blue energy that was heading towards him. He stood quickly and cupped his hands on his right side. Enough was enough. He had to fight a little harder if he didn't want to get hurt or killed. Me, ha, me, ha, he yelled, firing off a stream of blue energy at the approaching ball. It splashed against the surface of it and began to halt the ball's descent. Ari's eyes widened when he noticed it was still moving. He narrowed his eyes on the small golden ball in the sky, as Pan put almost all the force she could into driving the ball towards him. He growled and yelled out. There was a swooshing sound and a burst of light, as Harry's aura began flickering more quickly. Blue electrical bolts were zipping around him, his hair stood taller and longer, and his muscles bulged. The Z-Team watched in awe as Harry powered up. The Z-Team were tense and waiting to spring in as soon as Harry couldn't handle the fight. Harry let out a yell as he put more of his power into the Kamehameha. As the beam of energy grew larger and brighter, slowly it halted the ball's descent. He let out another yell as he pushed harder, and slowly the ball started moving in the other direction. There was an echoing crash, as the ball suddenly sped off, Harry's eyes widening when he noticed the drained Pan not moving as the ball quickly sped towards her. Harry quickly instant transported behind Pan. Grabbing her arm, he threw her towards the ground, aiming so she would land in front of his friends. He held his breath as the ball quickly approached. He tried to teleport again, but wasn't fast enough as the ball crashed into him. He screamed loudly as the key engulfed him. Everyone on the ground watched in horror as the huge blue ball swallowed Harry up. Trunks and Vegeta quickly powered up to Super Saiyan and took off towards the ball as fast as they could. Gohan and Goku were busy restraining Pan as she thrashed about in their arms, and could only watch with everyone else as Vegeta and Trunks flew to the great ball of Ki. Suddenly the ball shrank to the size of a tennis ball, and exploded, the force knocking everyone onto the ground, and blowing back Vegeta and Trunks. Dend walked towards the still struggling Pan and placed his hand on her temple. He murmured something in Latin before Pan stilled and blacked out. He looked out towards where the ball of key was mere seconds ago. His eyes darting around in search of Harry. The black clouds and storm were now gone, the sky clear and blue. "Where is he?" whispered Godin. Tien shook his head. I have no idea," he murmured. Everyone turned quickly at the whooshing sound that came from behind them, their eyes widening at what they saw. A bloody and exhausted-looking Harry was standing woozily behind them. "Yo," he smiled. Before his eyes rolled back into his head, Harry coughed and looked about wearily. The last he remembered was him managing to get away from the energy ball, although he had been very, very lucky to get out in time. He looked up as he spotted a figure at the bottom of the bed he was lying in. "Hey Harry," Den spoke quietly. "Hey," he croaked. "Everything all right?" "What happened?" Den gave a small grin. "Hey, aren't I meant to ask if you are all right?" Harry laughed slightly, like I'd be that normal. Den shook his head. "Well, you'll be pleased to know that everything has been fixed. Pan is fine. Although she is still asleep, the only problem is, Dumbledore ran off before we could get a word with him back at Hogwarts, but he won't be able to do much," he smiled. "Let him try and do something," Harry growled. "Anyways," he continued, "I have a story to tell you, but I'll keep it short. A few hundred years ago, unknown to anyone, a Saiyan came to Earth. The Muggles never knew of anything, as this Saiyan was a scouter. Wizards, however, discovered through Saiyan's ship, and from them, learned of the Saiyan planet, the Saiyan race and more importantly, their abilities. The Saiyan left though, unaware his ship had been breached." Harry raised an eyebrow. "I'm afraid that a Saiyan is well known by wizards and witches. They are in fact studied by the Department of Mysteries here in Britain. Dumbledore recently figured out you were a Saiyan." Harry, Dended glanced sadly at his ex-student. "How?" Harry asked blankly. Den shrugged. "He was one of the few I couldn't mind wipe, and he some friends in the Department of Mysteries. He found some files, and connected your changed appearance, power and aura to the ones told of in them files." Harry growled, however he stopped when he saw the sly smile on Den's face. "However, I've managed to stop Dumbledore from spreading this. He owed Came a life debt, and as his replacement, I could, and did, enact it. He can't tell anyone, and I mean anyone, in any way, shape or form," he finished happily. Harry frowned. "I still don't like the idea of the old guy knowing I'm not entirely human." Den nodded. "Me too, but that can't be helped." He looked up sharply. "I gotta go. Take care of yourself, kid." He disappeared from view just as Madame Pomfrey came over. "Ah, you're awake, are you? Well, let's see how you're doing, honestly. What were you thinking doing a dive like that? Could have broke your neck," she fussed. Harry had to smirk at Den's excuse as to why he was there. Harry entered the Great Hall whistling. He hadn't felt this good in a long time. He had decided to keep his powers off limits now that absolutely no one knew about it anymore. He sat down at the end of the table, where nobody was sitting, and got himself some food. His mind was moving a mile a minute. He knew that Dumbledore was no doubt going to try something. Oh, how he wished to just wrap his hands round his wrinkled old neck and throttle the shit bag. He glanced up at the head table and was pleased to notice he wasn't there. He did not want to see him until after his anger management, or he would not be held responsible for his actions. He finished his meal and left quickly, heading towards the room of requirement. He had some stress to let out. And vodka, regal and guitar shredding sounded like the best place to start. Harry was standing on a raised platform in the center of the room. The walls were lined with amps, and the floor covered in empty bottles of beer, vodka and Jack Daniels. There were at least 4 empty packets of Regal scattered around. The loud roaring of children of Bodom's song, "Hate Me," was going, with Harry growling out the lyrics, his fingers flying across his guitar, and his head banging along to the tune. The room provided the other instruments, which were magically playing their own tabs and chords along with Harry. Harry himself was standing on top of an amp, wearing his baggy black trousers with studded belt, and no shirt on. His hair hung damp with sweat, which was making his body glow thanks to the stage lights. He finally ended the song, and sat against the amp breathing heavily. He grabbed the nearest bottle, which was a Jack Daniels, and took a deep gulp of the burning liquid. He gave a sigh and laid his guitar down. He had to admit, he felt much better. seeing as how he was losing feeling in his legs that was saying something. He stuck out a hand and a regal cigarette appeared in his hand. He held his finger up and created a flame with his elemental abilities. He took a draw and sat back contently. It had been a few months since he had last had a good drink night, so he was enjoying himself. With a thought, Mendes, beneath a burning sky, started to play. He gave a smile and hummed along to it. His head snapped up when he felt the door open. He gulped a bit, hoping to God it was not a teacher. He got the impression if McGonagall or someone caught him drunk he would be in a bit of trouble. He looked and gave a sigh as Pan, Blaise and Hermione walked in. Pan's eyes were slightly red, he had no doubt she had been crying. "Harry," Pan's shaky voice called. He could feel his heart break at the completely lost look on Pan's face. He waved her over and pulled her into a hug. Pan began to cry, sobbing into his shoulder and repeating, "I'm so sorry," over and over again. He held her and rubbed small circles on her back, telling her it was okay. Eventually she sat up and got a good look at him. She gave a small smile and asked, "How much have you had?" Harry shrugged. "Lost count, not a knot though I'm still conscious." Both Blaise and Pan burst out laughing. Hermione however was looking at him in shock. "Are you mad? Why on earth are you drinking alcohol? You're only 13, she shrieked. Harry gave a small laugh before responding. "I am emancipated dear, so I can drink legally," he said in a posh accented voice. Blaise laughed at Hermione's thunderous look, and looked around the room. "Shit, you've been busy ain't you?" She glanced at the empty cigarette packets and bare bottles. She looked interested at the wall of amps, and he knew she badly wanted to join him in drinking and jamming. Harry just snorted. "Do you blame me? Goddamn old shithead." Pan nodded in agreement. "If I ever get the chance to, I'll rip his head off his shoulders." Harry looked at Hermione and Blaise and asked Pan, "Do they?" She nodded. "Yay." Dend let them know, but he also made sure no Legilimens could look into their minds. Harry nodded his head and drained the last of his Jack Daniels. He stood up and swayed a little. "You care to join me?" He asked. Pan nodded and got a Smirnoff Ice from the ROR. Blaise got herself a bottle of Red Square. Hermione Jussert huffed and got an orange juice. "Someone's got to make Sue." "You all don't kill yourselves," she responded to their inquisitive looks. And so the night went on, with Blaise, Pan and Harry eventually jamming out crazily, much to Hermione's amusement. She was surprised at how good Harry was. He could sing most of the rock and death metal perfectly. He claimed, "My voice is magic dear," and continued playing the Children of Bodom song they were playing. It was almost 4 a.m. when they all settled down for a night in the ROR. All were thankful it was Saturday. Hogwarts, prepare to be rocked. Lol, I'm sorry about the slowness everyone, sadly I'm pretty busy with school. And my GF's dragging me uptown after school, so I don't have much time anymore to write. There's also the fact I'm really into Naruto at the moment. I watched series 1 and I'm hooked lol. So why? I started this sometime in October, so the reviews I was answering are there, and I'll leave it like that ATM and I'll answer new ones when I next update. January. Princess Star Nako the First Su OU1. You have just given me a great idea about the Saiyans, which I will try to include in this chappy. And as I said, there was another Saiyan that was on Earth, years ago. I'm talking like hundred of years. Wizards discovered said Saiyan spacecraft, which had a brief history of their race. Saiyan came back, killed some wizards, some escaped. He went to kill them, but Vegeta's father, Harry's grandfather, ordered all Saiyans back to planet Vegeta before he got the chance to. Does that answer? Basic reasons. Dumbledore has a mighty plan to attempt to control Harry, and you know what? I don't have a clue what it is. Lol. So I will have to figure it out, darn. Anyways, Dumbledore won't be killed off. I have a basic idea of what I'm gonna do with him come later. Ron however, die. Woo. Lol. Anyways, enough. On with the story. Hogwarts, prepare to be rocked. Harry gave a low moan. He held his pillow over his head to keep out the bright light that was coming in from somewhere. Speaking of somewheres, where the hell was he? He tried to move, try, of course, being the key word. He barely managed a mega twitch before he decided to give up. After all, one does not try and beat a hangover. Because said hangover can turn nasty if you try to fight it. Harry tried vaguely to remember what had happened the night before, apart from the obvious that he had gotten drunk. Again, he desperately wished for a way to stop his heart beating without killing himself. With every beat of the heart, it was followed by a throb in his head. Yep, he had definitely gotten drunk. He moved pillow slowly and leaned his head up slowly, looking around him to get an idea exactly what the fuck was going on. He saw Hermione and Blaise sleeping. Well, Hermione was sleeping on a queen-size bed, and Blaise was passed out on an old couch, one leg falling down to the floor, arms spread wide and hair everywhere. He looked to his left and gave a small groan. Pan was curled up on the same bed as him, and what's worse, his arms were currently wrapped round her. He had flashes to what happened last night. Drink, music, drink, fags, drink, jamming and of course, drink. He opened his mouth to maw. A request, but all that came out was a weird croaking sound. He cleared his throat and whispered, for the benefit of his headache, for an anti-hangover potion. One appeared before him and he gladly swallowed it, almost jumping and sacrificing himself to whatever god there was there when his headache went away and he started to feel good again. He sat up and went towards the window the room had made. With a thought, a balcony was added on the outside. He stood outside and took a deep breath, the cold clear morning air making him smile. He sat down on a chair that appeared and stared at the red-laced horizon. He gave a yawn. After all, wouldn't you be tired after only an hour's sleep? Thankfully Harry's magic allowed him to stay awake for as long as he wanted. So long he got rest after at least a week. He requested a cold glass of water from the room. After all, he knew that after a night's heavy drinking, you needed to drink a lot of water because of the dehydration, which I have a feelin'. Gee, I've spelt wrong lol, and he preferred the water ice cold. He sat there for at least 3 hours, relaxing and watching the scenery around him. He idly noticed that the birds from the forest were rather loud, as he discovered. Most birds were. His mind was currently racing about, any and all problems swimming through his head. Dumbledore, Pan, Hogwarts, Gringotts, his family, everything. He was currently planning a gig he wanted to set up. He had 2 friends, Chris and Billy, he needed to get in contact with. They were Harry's best friends in the UK and both were killer guitarists. They had dragged him up on stage once when the original singer for their band hadn't turned up, and they had been great. So they had decided to set up a band, but they couldn't find a drummer, but thanks to Blaise that was all solved. He'd have to get in contact with them soon. It was around 8 o'clock when Harry finally went back in, deciding it would be best to get Pan some anti-hangover potion. He remembered the last time Pan had been drinking with him. He had never been so scared of her until he discovered she had a bad reaction to hangovers. He shivered slightly. It had not been a pretty morning. He walked over to the sleeping girls, and deciding to play it safe, woke Hermione first. She opened her eyes and stared at him sleepily, before she gave a yawn and sat up. Hey, she yawned slightly again. How are you doing? She gave a small smirk towards him. He mirrored her smirk and replied, Great, I so owe the guy who discovered anti-hangover potions. Hermione pouted. Damn, I was looking forward to seeing you Sweefer. He laughed and nodded towards Blaise. Make do with her, I'll handle Pan, trust me you don't ever want to. He winced. Hermione smiled before heading over to Blaise. Harry Plonley himself next to Pan and shook her shoulder slightly, smiling and shaking his head when he heard Blaise's yell of, Hermione. Seems she decided cold water was a good wake-up method. Pan looked up at him and made an incoherent sound, before closing her eyes and holding her arms over her eyes. Harry wordlessly handed her the potion. Her eyes brightened when she recognized the unique orange potion. She slowly gulped it down before sighing in thanks. That better? He asked. She gave a small affirmative sound. Cuddling up to him, she looked up at him and moaned, tired. Harry grinned before ruffling her hair. Pan batting at his hand. Rise and shine, sweetheart. Another day, another adventure, he chuckled. Soon enough the group were heading down to the Great Hall. Harry was telling Blaise about Jake and Billy, and explaining how they had been planning to set up an official band but couldn't get a decent drummer. She was grinning happily at the fact they were so close to setting it up. As the walked into the hall, both Harry and Blaise bumped into Hermione and Pan, who had halted suddenly. Harry looked up in concern when he noticed Pan's clenched fists and narrowed eyes. Dumbledore was sitting at the head table talking with Flitwick. Harry felt hate boil up inside his chest and his fists clenched tightly. The plates and cutlery in the great hall began to rattle very slightly. Dumbledore looked up before he noticed the group staring at him. He gulped slightly when he noticed the death looks he was getting from Harry and Pan. Blaise and Hermione dragged the two steaming friends over to the Ravenclaw table, both all the while glaring harshly at Dumbledore. He would get his soon enough. Harry sighed as he closed the book he had been reading. It was a book of his own on the dark arts. Even though he knew them, it always helped to calm his temper. Reading curses along the lines of turning a person inside out did wonders, working the anger out when imagining it being used on your enemies. The girls had all went to Hogsmeade, and Harry was still in the room of requirement. He stood up and placed his book in his bottomless bag and headed towards the Ravenclaw dorms. On his way, a voice came from behind him. Harry, quote. Harry turned round to see Professor Lupin standing there. Professor Lupin. Harry nodded his head. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in Hogsmeade with your friends? He asked with a small frown. Harry shrugged. They wanted some girl time, and I don't really need anything from the town. Lupin's eyebrows rose slightly. Would you care to join me for a cup of tea then? He waved his hand idly in the direction of his office. Harry shrugged and Lupin led him to his office. Harry sat and glanced around. It was a rather interesting office. Books on defense lined the bookshelves on the wall. Loads of parchment covered his desk and many other knickknacks. All in all, it had a rather homely feel to it. Lupin handed him a mug of tea, which he had begun making while Harry was glancing round the room. So Harry, he started, I've noticed you seem to have experience with the course we're doing. Harry shrugged. Well, I study a lot, and where I was I had access to some very rare books. Lupin looked on in interest. Really? What type of books? What subjects did you study on? Harry gave a small smile and began to rattle of a brief amount of what he'd studied. Lupin gasped at one of them. Mind arts. He gaped. You know occlumency and legilimency. Harry shrugged. I'm a master in almost all known branches of magic. It may seem arrogant to say so, but hey, where I'm from I'm a registered genius in both the Muggle and magical worlds. Lupin gave an impressed whistle. If that's so, then why are you at Hogwarts? I mean, you're wasting so much of your time on stuff that must be like ABCs to you. Harry smiled slightly. I'm here for one reason, to make friends with kids my own age, and Pan. Lupin gave a wry grin. Ah yes, Miss Sun, I see that you seem rather close. Harry laughed. Maybe, but I refuse to do something she ain't wanting to. I think she's at the stage where she's caught in the middle. Lupin nodded and asked, you mentioned you had some Muggle masteries. What are those? Harry went into his bag and pulled out some files and handed them to him. These are a list of Muggle and magical degrees I have. Funnily enough, the British Ministry of Magic don't have a clue. But my country itself does. It's kinda disappointing they haven't checked up with the other countries. Lupin's eyes bulged as he read down the list. For magical transfiguration, potions, herbology, defense against the dark arts, ancient runes, history of magic, magical theory, charms, care of magical creatures, medi-magic, Muggle studies, ancient linguistics, modern linguistics, astronomy, arithmetic, Muggle magical geography, magical law, goblins history, goblins etiquette customs, traditional practices, genealogy, astral magics, apparition, animagus, enchantment specialties, weaponry specialties, alchemy, business law, vampire history, vampire etiquette customs and magical politics. For Muggle he had computer science, information technology, library science, linguistics, biology, medical PhD, legal PhD, physics, literature, psychology, chemistry, criminal justice, Muggle law, engineering, archaeology, and music. Quote, That is a lot of accomplishments, he said weakly. Harry laughed. I know, heck, I have almost all the countries in Central Europe after me. Heck, the American Muggle and magical spec ops are dying to get their hands on me. Electrical companies in Japan are begging me to work for them. Heck, I've even had NASA and all these other top industries after me. Lupin took a gulp of tea and shook his head weakly. This boy, the son of two of his best friends, was a prodigy, both Muggle and magical, and almost all these other countries were after him. Was the British ministry that stupid to not be after him? Harry laughed and walked off, leaving a still dumbfounded Lupin with his list of accomplishments. After 10 minutes he stood up and walked out of his office. The headmaster had to know this. Thoughts and attacks. I've sat in school one day on a free period and actually wrote a plan on what to do, so this chap is actually the first I've done that will be thought out lol, but I lost that plan. So the swearing finally got some comments. Lol, okay, I'll hold off on it, I'm Scottish, what can I say? Swearing's constant here. Ah well, enough talk, you all want it, so here you go. Thoughts and attacks. Albus Dumbledore, the leader of the light, most acknowledged wizard in the world, supreme mugwump of the Wizengamot, and Harry Potter's number 2 on his list of people to torture. Dumbledore was sitting at his desk, rubbing his temples and pondering to himself. It seemed like the Potter boy had done enough to ruin his plans, but no, he wasn't content just stopping there. He looked down at the list Lupin had given him. Potter, a prodigy, famous in almost all countries but the UK, in both magical and Muggle areas. He sighed wearily, his thoughts drifting back to his meeting with the one who had caused all his problems so far. Flashback. Dumbledore paced in his office. It was unbelievable. His plan, like all others so far, had backfired horribly. The students could have been injured or killed, all because of him. He felt guilty. Sure, he was a few cogs short in the head, but he was headmaster, damn it. He never even took into consideration what may have happened to his students. He sat down and waved his wand, conjuring a cup of hot tea. He took a sip and sighed. Where could he go from here? What were his options? You have none, Dumbledore, a voice answered his thought. He sat up quickly, gripping his wand. Who is there? Come out. I am armed, he called. The voice chuckled. Before a cloaked figure stepped out, Dumbledore paled. Cammy, he whispered fearfully. Cammy, chuckled. No, I am not Cammy, he spoke. Dumbledore sagged in relief. I am his successor, he flinched. What do you want with me? Dumbledore asked. The young guardian scowled. I want you to keep out of Harry Potter's life. Dumbledore sagged. Another problem concerning Potter. You do know what the boy's destiny is. What has been told by the fates? He asked Dend. Dend scowled. I do, and I know how powerful he is, and you, Albus Dumbledore, are sailing into uncharted territory. Dumbledore glared. He must be trained by me. How else will he survive Voldemort? Sure, he's slightly powerful, but it's nothing compared to Voldemort. Dend gave a barking laugh. You foolish man, not powerful enough. He's 10 times more powerful than you and Voldemort combined. Dumbledore shot to his feet. What nonsense. He can't even match me. What makes you so damn sure? Dend marched up to the desk and glared at Dumbledore. Because he was my apprentice, he hissed. There was a long silence, before Dumbledore dropped back into his seat, pale and in shock. You trained the boy, he whispered fearfully. Dend nodded. In magic only. He received Muggle education from his aunt and her friend, and physical training from his father and his friend. Dumbledore looked up. The child is a Saiyan, who could possibly have taught him? Dend smirked. His uncle, Vegeta, Prince of the Saiyans, and his foster uncle, Goku, the most powerful Saiyan to ever exist. Dumbledore felt like he was about to throw up. There was no chance in hell he had a chance controlling him, if he had the Guardian of the Earth as a mentor, and a Saiyan family. Dend cleared his throat. Anyway, the reason I am here is for one reason. You will not tell anyone of his heritage, or you will face grave consequences. This is ordered directly from the Kais themselves. ND King Yema says he is very close to sending you down with all the other assholes who became cocky with power. Dumbledore held his head in his hands, but nodded wearily. An order from the Kias. If he refused, he would forever be tortured in hell by them and Yema. To ensure this, I invoke Kane's debt. You owe him, Dumbledore. Consider this a life debt being activated. With that, Dend turned to leave. Oh, by the way, you are very, very lucky to be alive right now. If it wasn't for myself and the Kai's involvement, I can assure you, you would be dead right now. A Saiyan is very protective of their family. And you have pissed off everyone Harry holds dear. With that, he disappeared. End flashback. Dumbledore took another sip of his tea. The apprentice of the most powerful being on earth, blessed with the Kai's favor. One of the royal-blooded Saiyans. Was there no end to this boy's power? He scowled. Under Kane's debt he could not do much to publicly slander him. But he did have a few ideas on how to get the boy to become more open to his suggestions. Dumbledore grinned. Yes, there was many things he could do, but he'd have to bide his time. The boy would have to be left alone this year. Unknown to all but Fox. Dumbledore's eyes flashed a steel gray. Fox chirped sadly, not knowing how to help his master. Harry gave a small sigh of content. It was Halloween and Hogwarts had to finally live up to its expectations. There were thousands of sweets. Boo would be green with envy if he knew. So Harry, Blaise started, getting his attention. I've been thinking, for some time during the year. How about we set up a band night? We could have it in the, you know where. Harry looked thoughtful. Yay, that could work. We tell the students only, and have a big party. We can get drink from the room no problem. And I'm sure I could keep the teachers away for a little while. Peeves'll help no doubt, and I can get Chris here no prob. So first it'll be me on lead guitar and vocals, Pan on bass, you on drums Blaise. And Chris on second guitar. How's that sound? What about keyboard? Children of Bodom and Sonata Arctica songs will need them, she pointed out. Harry shrugged. I dunno. We'll work on it closer to that time. It'll probably be for end of term, so we got a while yet. Blaise shrugged and the feast went on as normal. Harry and Pan had gotten into another argument flirting moment which made Blaise and Hermione grin knowingly at the two friends, who both scowled at them in return. Later on Harry was sitting had just sat down to a soft chair when their head of house came running in. Attention pupils, there has been a situation and we need to get to the Great Hall now. Quickly now, called Professor Flitwick called, his voice magnified. Harry and Pan shared a worried glance, but followed the rest of the student down to the Great Hall. Inside they were immediately confronted by Hermione and Blaise. Harry, did you hear? Hermione gasped. They say Sirius Black try Ed to get into the Gryffindor common room. Harry frowned. Do they know how he got in? He questioned them. Blaise shook her head. Nah, no idea. There's a rumor going around he's after you though. At East, that's what the Griffs are saying. Harry frowned. I recognize his name, but that's it. I just can't seem to remember where though. Pan suddenly had a troubled look in her eyes, although Harry never saw it. Both Blaise and Hermione did. Both sent her a questioning glance, but she subtly shook her head. Come on, Pan called. Let's get some of those sleep-in bags, it's getting late. All right, Pan. What's so wrong that you can't tell Harry about Sirius Black? Hermione asked, Blaise standing next to her also curious. Pan sighed. Well, I'll put it this way. You remember the Omega Comet that just barely missed the Earth a few years ago? Both girls nodded. It had been a muggle and magical catastrophe when it had been discovered, but thankfully it wasn't on a collision course with Earth. They had been very lucky indeed. What's that got to do with anything though? Blaise frowned. Pan seemed to swallow before she spoke shakily. That was when Den told Harry about Black. That meteor was Alda. She was left of a deserted planet that was almost triple the size of the planet Jupiter after Harry lost control. Hermione and Blaise both turned paper white and their jaws slumped to the floor. 3 times larger than Jupiter. Hermione whispered in awe and fear. He's really that powerful when angry. Blaise whimpered slightly. Pan nodded her head. Yes, Den and King Kai had to seal of the memory, he became so unstable. If Black was anywhere nearby, none of his molecules would be left. Both girls shook their heads. Wow, that boy is one hell of a wizard, Saiyan and man. Blaise grinned saucily, earning a glare from Pan. Both Hermione and Blaise laughed as they followed a grumping Pan. However, none of the girls noticed a young red-headed girl hiding behind a corner. Ginny Weasley grinned, hearts dancing in her eyes, before she turned and walked away. She had to tell Dumbledore.